Welcome everybody back to the Inside Our Galaxy podcast. I'm your host, Eric Hernandez, as always. It's been over a week since it has happened. We are now MLS Cup champions. The Galaxy, for the first time in 10 years, are on the top of the mountain, back where they belong. We are back. It has happened. We're going to talk about that game. We're going to talk about our final against the New York Red Bulls, which ended up being a 2 against the Red Bulls to ultimately get our 6th trophy, our 6th star. We're going to talk about that game. We're going to just recap that game. Maybe a little bit different, but we are going to recap that game, of course. It was a big game. And just so many moments in that game that really just a game to remember, definitely for sure. So we're just going to talk about that. And obviously now that we got our 6th star, now that the season is over, what does this mean next for the Galaxy? Obviously, the off season is here. It is back up and quick. We got off season, rumors, moves happening, things for next year that are going to happen. So obviously we're going to talk about that and preview some things that are going to happen in 2025. But good to be here. Last show of the season, of the year. So this is going to be a special one for sure with what we're going to talk about. But of course, I'm here, and with me as always is my co-host, LA Galaxy Central. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. Obviously, right now, it's very nice to have a break. The last couple of weeks for me, I've been super busy. Obviously, coming back and forth for Thanksgiving, then going back and forth for the final, then going back and forth for Christmas break. It's like, to finally be here for a long period of time just feels like really nice. It's been very busy, but yeah, obviously it's been busy in a really good way. And yeah, definitely look forward to talking about the championship, our 6th one, which, absolutely incredible. First one in 10 years. Definitely something to be very proud of. And yeah, I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah, definitely for sure, man. Obviously, it's been a little over a week since the game has happened. We didn't really get to talk about right away because obviously you went back to school. You had your finals and stuff and traveling and things like that. And so it's like obviously we had to wait a little bit, but now we're here. But just because it's a week later doesn't mean we can't talk about it. Everybody's still talking about it. Everybody's still zeked up with everything that happened and the fact that we got our 6th title, for the Galaxy. And honestly, man, like it's been crazy. And I've been dying to talk about this obviously on the show because, considering the fact that, we've been doing this for quite some time. Considering the fact that we've been doing quite some time, this is our 4th season, concluding our 4th season doing the show. We're MLS Cup champions, and like that's something that, it is pretty crazy to think when we started this that we've been wanting to, cover this season and hopefully, reaching to this point where we can talk about the Galaxy being champions. And here we are talking about it. But yeah, man, obviously, a 2-1 win against the New York Red Bulls that happened on December 7th, a day that will live in infamy, if you get the joke, I guess. But for sure, though, it's a day that we'll never forget, considering the fact that we got our 6th title. So, let's talk about that game, obviously. So, yeah, 2-1 against the New York Red Bulls. Let's talk a little bit about the first part of the game, because I think this is, we're gonna sort of recap this a little differently here. But let's talk about the first part of the game. Going into this game, tensions were high. The amount of energy in the stadium was high. Everything was turned up by like 1,000 going into that game, considering it was a final. Going into that game, we didn't know how this was going to be. Obviously, New York has this high pressing, style of play. The Galaxy, we know how their offense is. No Ricky Puig in this game. How is that going to affect the game? And seemingly in the beginning of the first 10 minutes or first 15 minutes, the Galaxy get it right going. You get that first goal from Joseph Painstill, which we kind of talked about last week. We talked about it last week. I had sort of said that, like, hey, Joseph Painstill still needs to find ways to get behind that back line, find ways to beat that Red Bulls back line. And I know you were kind of like, well, maybe they don't need to do that because it's, it's a different style of play. You don't have Ricky Puig. Joseph Painstill still does what he does best, finds a way to get that first goal in, with a pass from Gaston Brugman, who actually started this game, which was sort of a surprise going into that game. But let's talk a little bit, I guess, just sort of the beginning moments. I guess we can talk about the first goal in general. Like, how'd you feel about that first goal? The fact that we scored so early on, and how important just was that, starting off the game that way?
Yeah, look, it was the start we were all looking for, right? Whenever we scored the first goal at home, we never dropped a single point at home from that position. So you'd obviously feel very good about that. And with Ricky Puig out too, you see Gaston Brugman go in there. Well, Gaston Brugman stepped up massively in that moment, making that pass, kind of almost a Ricky Puig-esque sort of pass, if you want to call that. And yeah, Joseph Painstill got in behind the defense. He timed his run absolutely perfectly. Funny enough, we kind of talked about like last week, like, oh, did Stefan Fry make a mistake on the Joveljic shot? It was kind of debatable, but like, credit to Painstill for still putting it in, but when you look at the goalkeeper on the first goal, it's like, well, that's like definitely not debatable if it was a mistake or not. That was 100% like just a shocking moment from the Red Bull keeper. But hey, Paintsel timed his run perfectly. Gaston Brugman made a perfect pass, really stepped up, and we got the lead early at home, and that's the position you want to be in throughout the whole game.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And I think that's what, and that seemingly has always been the Galaxy game plan, right? Try to get it going right away, even though, sort of some part, towards this later part of the season, we kind of seen that the Galaxy sort of start off slow and then they build up into the second half. But the fact that you got to see them go in right away with a very early goal, I think it was, obviously would set the tone, and maybe you could say was the start of winning our sixth title or winning that game. Do you think that, I mean, obviously, getting that first goal is important, and like you mentioned, it's like we get that first goal, the Galaxy haven't really lost the game, or they haven't lost the game when we get that first goal. Like, how do you think, like, without having Ricky Puig, that kind of made it into a big factor? Because like I said, the Galaxy kind of had this thing of starting off slow, then building up into the game, but with no Ricky Puig, maybe they weren't able to do that as effectively, or maybe they couldn't really play the long game. So I don't know. Do you think not having Ricky Puig kind of made that made that happen, like to go in right away and try to get that first goal early?
I mean, when you're at home in a cup final, I think regardless, you're going to try to do that anyways. You want to be on the front foot. You want to, give yourself that advantage at any point in the game, especially early on. So I don't think him being in or out kind of made a difference. But, like, obviously, when you're playing a final without probably a top three player in MLS, arguably the best player in MLS not named Messi, where you're going to look at that and say, like, we're going to have to, take advantage early on and try to find mismatches early in the game to try to put ourselves in a good position, because losing one of your best players in the cup final definitely does make it, a lot harder to win than maybe it could have been.
Yeah, definitely for sure. But still though, like, I mean, when you look at the Galaxy just going in right away, it's like that's something you needed to do. And I think a lot of people kind of said that, like, if the Galaxy, or just in general, whether it was the Galaxy or the Red Bulls, whoever scores first, that's going to go a long way into basically winning in that game. And luckily, when you saw the Galaxy, score that first goal, it's like, okay, you have this sort of, maybe not like super confidence, but you got a little more confidence, saying like, all right, we get the lead first. We're trying to let's build more off of that, especially early on. There's, after that, like, there's so much more to play for, so much more, so much more time. So it's like getting that early goal was definitely impressive for sure. But then after that, you get another goal later on, I believe in the 13th minute by Dejan Joveljic, which boy, what a goal by him. Like, I mean, I like, I was in Victoria Block watching that game, and I couldn't really see the goal as well because of all the flags and everything. But like, whenever you saw whenever you saw the replay for that first Dejan Joveljic goal, you're like, man, like that was crazy. He basically took on everyone, somehow gets a shot off and gets the goal in there. Again, you can say it was also a goal where it was kind of like shocking that went in, but it went in. And you get another goal by Dejan in the beginning of of that game as well. 2-0 up in the 13th minute. So that was also another crucial goal, and ultimately being the winning goal for the game. I guess getting that, it was impressive getting that first goal. How much more confident, or how much more did you feel after that second goal, early on in that game when that happened?
Yeah, definitely very confident for sure. The next goal is going to be crucial in that game, absolutely. If we went two ahead, you would have thought like we would have started to pull away, and if the Red Bulls tied the game at that point, you would have thought like, well, the game's totally back on again. And yeah, the goal is honestly amazing. Like, Joveljic just takes it into the throat of the Red Bulls defense. Nobody surprisingly steps up to him. I think they all thought he was going to pass it to Joseph Paintsel, who was wide open on the left. Even I kind of thought he was going to pass it there. But Joveljic, kind of being a striker, being a goal scorer, kind of takes the selfish approach. Like, I have the opportunity to take this all the way, drives through. A really impressive strike, like you said. He got kind of like pushed over, had to hit it off balance, and then it just slowly rolls into the back of the net. And then Joveljic, puts the Galaxy up 2-0. You almost thought at that point, 2-0, 13 minutes at home, we were just going to cruise to an MLS Cup at that point. Obviously, that did not happen at all, but at that point, you felt like, we definitely had it in command, and that could have been very much the turning point of the game, which ultimately it was, but not in the, I guess, commanding sense maybe you thought it would have been at the time.
Yeah, like, obviously getting that second goal, like, and I get what you're saying. It's like you feel a bit more confident, and obviously maybe, like, yeah, you can say like you kind of felt like, okay, maybe we're gonna cruise a little bit here, but But definitely for sure, it was like at the time, like it felt good, and maybe later towards the game, you're kind of like, all right, maybe was that going to be the the game setter in a sense, after that game, but still like at the end of the game, you kind of realize, okay, that one changed everything. But at the time, like once it happened, you're just like, okay, we got it here. Then afterwards, you're kind of just like, okay, like once the game is going through and through, you're like, all right, what are we gonna do after that? But of course, once that goal happened, it was a great goal for Dejan Joveljic. And honestly, again, when you look at both goals, Joseph Paintstil, Dejan Joveljic, we were saying like who are going to be the guys who are going to score, who are going to be the guys who stepped up. Now, obviously, there was a lot of people on this team who stepped up. In this game, you can't just put it on one person. But we also kind of expected like, hey, we need Joseph Paintstil, we need Dejan Joveljic, and we also need Gabriel Peck to really step up here. Like even though there's no Ricky, we still have the offensive firepower to score goals. So it's like kind of like you were hoping to see that from in this final, seeing your big weapons and seeing your big players also step up without a very big piece. So I think seeing those two guys score very early on was big. It was massive. Not only for the game itself, but for also just for them and as players. But it was great to see, like just for sure, to see those guys actually step up in those big moments, and we've been wanting to see those guys step up in big moments, and they certainly have for sure. But yeah, after that 2-0, we get one there. Afterwards, I think 10 minutes later, Red Bulls end up getting a goal, third minute off a corner kick, not necessarily directly from the corner kick. We did get some juggling of the ball within the box here, here and there. Nealis from the Red Bulls gets a really good strike on that ball to ultimately make it 2-1, pull one back in. Then that's kind of where you maybe kind of felt like, all right, then the Red Bulls score one here. It's a little bit closer than we thought it was. Maybe we were not going to certainly going to cruise it all the way through, but definitely the Red Bulls pull one back, and you kind of had to be on your toes a little bit after that goal. But once that happened, like how'd you feel about that goal, or like sort of where the game was going to go at that point?
Yeah, obviously that was a super frustrating goal to land, just very unfortunate. Because at that point in the game, like if the Galaxy made it 3-0, the game is just about over. Like it would have been pretty much done. But then if you let the Red Bulls get one back, then they have all the momentum. And to let them get one back, just 10 minutes later, still have a lot of time to go before the end of the first half, having that much momentum the rest of the game just felt like such a massive blow to the Galaxy. And I feel like that goal is preventable too. Like off a corner kick again, it's like it was kind of weird because Joseph Paintstil kind of tried to like juggle the ball in our own box, which didn't really make much sense. And then Yoshida had like a weird scorpion kick clearance when like I don't know, I just feel like both of them could have got the ball out sooner, could have sent it out for another corner, maybe for a throw in. Instead we just tried to keep possession too much, try to find like an outlet. It didn't work at all. And then you let the Red Bulls get one back through a set piece. It's like then it was 2-1. Instead, we could have got the third goal. We never did. And then, it kind of changed the rest of the game, like how we approached it. It made it, very nervous to watch. So, I mean, that goal was just a very unfortunate goal to lay in at a very unfortunate time. Thankfully, it didn't cost us anything, but I do feel like that goal is definitely preventable.
Yeah, I could see it being preventable. I mean, don't get me wrong; I think it was still a pretty good goal from the Red Bulls, and at a point in a final, you're going to take a goal any way you can, no matter how it is. And I think, for them being there, right moment, right time to get that strike in, and even though it was a bit preventable, they still took advantage of that mistake, right? Or you could say sort of mistake off of that goal, off of that, trying to clear that ball. But for sure, it's like once that goal happened, I think everybody kind of realized like, all right, then maybe we do gotta settle down a little bit here because it is, the Red Bulls just pull one back. After that, we don't know what's going to happen. They have the ability to go and score or find a way to get back into this game. Like anything could really happen. And the fact that once that Red Bulls goal happened, it was the 23rd minute. And again, there's still a lot of time left in that in that game. So it's just like, okay, now what's going to happen? What is going to be the approach, for both of these teams? How is each team going to play after this with already 3 goals in less than 25 minutes? So it's like very, very, I would say it's a little bit nerve wracking in a sense where it's just like, it's like, what is just going to happen here? But, yeah, like once that goal happens, I think that really just kind of changed the way that we played, and for both teams, really, they changed the way that they played and how they approached that game. And that's kind of where, where the game really went nerve wracking. And then everything was just, everybody was just nervous after that, and nobody knew what was going to happen. But I think, after that goal and, after the first half, we got to experience that. And going into the second half, like, I mean, how'd you feel going into that second half? Because again, with how that second half went, like, and sort of just the Galaxy, sort of turning it on the second half, like, did you feel like anything major was going to happen in that second half, or what were your, like, I guess, initial thoughts going into that second half?
I mean, honestly, I really had no way of knowing. The only thing I was really thinking in that second half was just do whatever it takes to win, right? That's the only reason we were in this game, why we wanted to be in it. We wanted to win that game no matter how it came, what form it came. So I was just like, whatever happens this half is going to happen, and that's fine. But whatever winning plays we can make, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, we need to make those plays. We just got to do whatever it takes to win, pretty much, and that's all I was really looking for.
Yeah, yeah, definitely for sure. But I think, for me, I was like, we got to get that third goal. Like, I mean, at least for me, that was just sort of my thoughts. I was like, we got to get that third goal, because I think if you get that third goal, that really just solidified everything, especially in the second half. So it's like, if we get that third goal, that really just changes everything. But we had our moments. There was we had a few shots. I think Gabriel Peck had like really two good chances to really get that third goal. Mickey Yamane also had a shot that hit the post. We thought that was possibly going to go in. Like, there was so many moments for the Galaxy that they could have gotten that third goal, but they seemingly did it. And the Red Bulls did too. Not as many, but they also had a few chances as well. I think Forsberg also had this one really good chance where he could have tied the game up, and also kind of late in the game, but it ultimately just in general was just kind of like, the both teams had chances, but I think the Galaxy at least looked a little more threatening when it came to that part of the field, or that part of the game. But I mean, was there at that point in the second half? I know you're saying like, okay, at this point, anyway, we win it, we have to win it, no matter what it takes. But did you think that there was going to be one point where it's just like, all right, then we're not going to score another goal. We got to play defensively, more defensively. When was the like? Was there a time where you felt like that this team had to like sort of bunker down a little bit, or did you think that they still had to go in no matter what?
Well, up until the final 20 minutes, like I really wanted them to get that third goal, obviously, but then watching that second half, it just kind of came to the realization of me that's like, I don't know if we are going to get that third goal. I don't know how likely it is. And it was kind of funny because I saw like a video where Greg Vanney talked to the team at halftime and said like, we need to get after these guys. We need to, push forward and try to get that third goal. Well, kind of to me, like I know like we had some like half opportunities, but to me it kind of seemed like the entire second half, we sort of just parked the bus and kind of sat back defensively and just allowed a lot of pressure to come towards us. That's kind of what it felt like to me. Like it didn't really feel like we had that many really true opportunities to score that third goal. So like I kind of was hoping for it, like I think everyone was. But then when I kind of saw the way we were playing, it's like, well, I don't really think it's gonna come at any certain point.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Like, I mean, I think that we did have some good chances though. Like, we did have good chances to get that third goal. It's just that we just, it was just a good save, or we just didn't really execute the right way. But I think we were still trying to get that. And speaking of that, like the halftime talk with Greg Vanney, like it was also that it's kind of cool to hear him say just like it's like, oh, they're not good enough. It's like we can go actually get this win, and win this game, and I think that was pretty cool to see from that halftime talk. But still though, like I think the way he kind of said that in the halftime, saying like, hey, we got to go get it. Like there was a point where it was just like they weren't gonna go get it, and I thought it was interesting, like. And I know it was kind of late in the game, but like I think it was like in the 85th minute they bring on Fagundes, they take off Joveljic. I thought that was kind of interesting at the time because it was just like, well, if something happens here, you don't have Joveljic after that, so it's like, what are we kind of cooking up here in terms of those type of things? And even then, like Greg Vanney didn't make that many subs in this game. Obviously, Royce came on before him. Diego Fagundes came on, and then I forget who else came on after that. I'm probably missing somebody. I don't really remember,
It
but
was Neil.
okay, yeah, Neil came in. So, yeah, because I believe Garces, came out because of the whole injury thing. So like Neil came in, but still though, it's just like then we kind of went a little bit more defensive, and I think to me it was just like, all right, then it's like how to like it's either gonna really work out for us or it's really gonna just be something's gonna horribly go wrong. But luckily, at the end of the day, we ended up getting that we ended up holding on and we ended up winning that game 2-1. And honestly though, like once the final whistle blew, like I mean, man, it was just surreal. Like I couldn't really believe it. Like it was funny because like for the Western Conference final, like once that whistle blew and that happened, I was like, I couldn't believe anything. And then for this game, it was just like I really couldn't believe anything. Like what the fuck just happened? And even today, after a week, I'm just like, we really won. It's like we really won this championship, and it really doesn't feel real, but it is. And yeah, man, like once that final whistle blew, just everything erupted. Everything just, I don't know. Like I felt like everything came sort of full circle, I guess, in a sense, right? Because it just happened. But I mean, for you, I guess as well. Like once that final whistle just happened, like how, like what was the feelings, man? Like how'd you really feel like once that final whistle blew?
Honestly, at the time, just relief, honestly, because in that entire second half, I feel like we were just taking pressure after pressure after pressure after pressure, wave after attack, balls coming into our box, just a lot of pressure, and I was just like, I was so nervous once the final whistle blew. I think I just felt more relief than anything. Like, thank God we did it. It's finally over. We finally won. The game's done. Like, I think I just felt like, okay, like, let's take a deep breath here and let's enjoy this now.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was just like, yeah, I mean, obviously you felt the relief, you felt everything, just the emotion sort of just exploded, like like or just like all the emotions just came out. You felt happiness, you felt, I mean, really just happiness for any, if anything, right? Like you just felt happiness, you felt relieved that it was over, and then we won our sixth cup. Like I mean, after 10 years, 10 long years, maybe even some might say kind of brutal years at points. It's just like, yeah, man, like it had happened, and I think it's just like, again, it's very hard to think of. It's very hard to just believe about it that it already happened, but for sure, once that final whistle blew, it was over. Everybody was running. Actually, first before the actual final whistle, there was a whistle blown before that. Everybody thought it was over. It ended up being offsides, which I thought that was kind of funny, but also played with my emotions a little bit. I was like, man, it's like I thought it was over at that point. But once the actual final whistle blew, it was just like everything would. It felt like a, well, obviously it was a job completed, but it was just like it felt like everything was just good. It was complete. Everything was complete, and we finally got what we wanted after 10 years. And I think that's something. It's something I'll never. I guess I'll never forget. As cliche as that sounds, it's something that I guess I'll never forget. Once that final whistle blew. I mean, but still though, like that was just honestly really sensational moment. But I mean, you have any other, I guess, thoughts about the game in general? I guess not even just necessarily about the game inside. Like I guess also like the atmosphere, just sort of the day that happened. Like how like you have any other thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, we took advantage of our opportunity for sure. Like, it was just meant to be this season. I think we're going to talk about some other things later, but like, a lot went our way for sure. Like, all our signings worked out. A lot of people stepped up for us. And then you saw even these playoffs. Like, by the time the second round of the playoffs started, we had every single game at home. So it just felt like it felt very good because a lot worked out in our way and we were able to take advantage of this massive opportunity we had to win a championship in our own home, and I'm very grateful that we had that opportunity. And I'm even more happy that we were able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, definitely for sure. It's just like, and it was crazy. Like for me, it's like I don't know if it was just maybe I was being a little too, maybe, I mean, not maybe like, I guess you can say reserved about everything, but it was just like there was just kind of moments I was like, all right, then like it's like it was kind of like I won't believe it until it happens, and then once it happens, it's just like now it felt more believable. But even then, like I said, like it was even hard to comprehend that we had won everything. But yeah, man, like we just took everything went our way. We took advantage of everything that had happened, and it was kind of funny because like we were talking about, or at least you were talking about like a few weeks ago when when we were talking, even when the Houston game, you were like, it's like, oh, like does this team feel cursed? And even after Ricky injury, you were like, does this team feel a little cursed or whatever? It's like, but even after those those bad moments, it's just like this team has always found a way to bounce back and to move forward. The move forward mentality that this team had, and I've always appreciated that. And I think that was sort of the mentality that gave them this championship. And honestly, just the championship, that was their championship mentality. It's like no matter what happens, we're going to keep moving forward. We're going to keep doing our job no matter what gets in our way. And they did it. Like they really did it after that. And I think that's something sort of special. Saying that. And I know we even talked about it, after the game and stuff like that. It's like if you look back in January, even on this show during the preseason, we were thinking about it. It's like I don't think any of us thought that this team was going to go win the championship. And I know, like, after the season went and throughout the season continued, our expectations sort of changed. But if we talk about January versions of Eric and Alex, it's just like we never thought that this was going to be a thing. And so I always think about that sort of thing. And it's just like it's like, yeah, we never thought this was going to be. And I mean, I don't know, man. Like it just feels so surreal, but it's happened, and it feels great.
That's kind of my thing though with like predictions about this team. Like, yeah, you could look at some people that were wrong about this team, whether that's in the media, our own fans, like sure, but I mean, let's be honest about this team though, like how are we really supposed to know like what was gonna happen when we signed Yamane? Like I don't think any of us would have thought he would have been the best right back in MLS. We signed Garces who didn't play like any of our first 12, 13 games. Like we didn't know he was going to be a starter in the playoffs and be this good. We signed Nelson. We didn't know he was going to be this reliable for us. Like even Peck and Payne. So like, yeah, we like the signings a lot, but even like me, like the biggest Gabriel Peck fan who loved the signing, thought like he rated his talent in the Brazilian league. I mean, I didn't have him having the most goal contributions in MLS. I didn't know what Paintsel was gonna do. And then another big part, Joveljic. Like last year, Joveljic had the worst season of his career, scoring like 5 goals, 2 garbage time goals. We lost like every game with him, hardly ever scoring. And then this season, he scores almost like 25 goals, 6 goals in the playoffs, scores the game-winning goal in MLS Cup. That kind of goes back to my point earlier where it's like everything went right for this team. Somehow all our signings that we made that we weren't sure about how to rate at the time, even if it was positive, it turned out to be like somehow even more than that, which kind of like, and it was for every signing too. That's how it went just so right for us overall.
Yeah, definitely. It's like it's very hard to predict things, right? And it was kind of crazy because we've had this. I know we had this argument one time at one point. We had kind of talked about, well, going into the season, is this a rebuild or a retool year? Obviously, I said it was rebuild. You said it was retool. But like my thing was always that why it was a rebuild was that going into the season we got rid of like 15 players or like around like somewhere around that number on a 22-man roster. It's just like very little people, very few players from last year stayed on this team. And so a lot of players came in, and yes, although the signings were, two DPs like Painstone Peck, we still didn't know what they were going to become. And you mentioned all the other guys like Nelson, Garces, you can even add McCarthy in there. We were saying like, is McCarthy going to be really the starting keeper? Like, even though he was a backup, with LAFC, like sure he would win MVP, but as a starter, was he going to be that leader for us, going to be that guy for us? He was also a question mark. Like there were so many other question marks, even though they were positive signings. It was just kind of like, like going into that, we were just kind of like, well, how is this team really going to react after that? But, so many moves came in, so many players came in. We also had to, I guess, sort of sacrifice some players. I mean, when you look at this time last year, we traded Tyler Boyd out. And I think even when that happened, I had said that, if trading Tyler Boyd becomes the reason why maybe we could win an MLS Cup, then I think, I don't want to say people are going to forget it, but people are going to kind of remember that kind of move and say like, all right, we got rid of a good player to bring in a better player, or ultimately a better player. And that got us into, where we are right now. And so I think it's just like the way going into this season and the way that we thought the season was going to go, it ultimately just exceeded expectations. And, it brought us back to the standard of where we need to be, of where this club needs to be. And that's winning championships. And now we're back into winning that championships. And, everybody always, throughout the season said, are we back? Are we back? And my thing was that, I can say we're back when we win, MLS Cup. And now that's happened. And it's fair to say that we are back. The standard of winning MLS Cup is back for the LA Galaxy. And and that's how it's going to be going into next season. Yeah. So, I mean, just in general, man, the expectation now is back to that. And I think that's going to be the mentality moving forward. And that's sort of a thing too. It's like everybody, like, although that was always the standard, and I think that is the standard for every team, is to win a championship and to win, MLS Cup. For the Galaxy, it was just kind of like, it felt weird because we hadn't had that opportunity to go back in and win it. Now we're back and winning it for sure. But yeah, man, like honestly, the way this season has turned out has been remarkable, man. And I guess, we can, I guess, talk about sort of a little bit about the players now, just in general. We don't even necessarily have to talk about, the game, but I guess we can talk, kind of go down with the starting lineup if that's cool with you. Yeah. All right then. So let's talk about some of these players here. Obviously, when you look at the defense from this game, you had John McCarthy, you had Mickey Yamane, you had Yoshida, you had Garces, and you had John Nelson starting up in this defense. Again, this was, the defense that we wanted to see in this final, of course. I mean, there wasn't going to be no other changes into that. But I mean, I guess how do you feel about I guess those guys in general in terms of the defense, and how did you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely massive. Honestly, I think McCarthy did a really good job leading the back line. Yamane again, a player that he's been incredible all year for us, just very consistent every game. Like I'm just saying the same thing every game about him, but that's really what he's leading me to. Just like been very inconsistent, very incredible. Definitely one of the best right backs, if not the best right back in MLS this season. Very good game from him. Yoshida and Garces in the final, absolutely massive. I mean, in the second half, like I was talking about earlier, there's just a lot of balls coming into our box, and especially Garces just getting him out every single time, time again, making massive plays for us defensively to keep us that 1 goal lead. And then Nelson, very solid again. I was very impressed with what I saw from him and the resurgence he had after Audi got injured after the 4th of July game at the Rose Bowl. Nelson's been the starter pretty much ever since, and yeah, it's definitely worked out great for us. You know, the defense only 4 goals allowed in the playoffs. That's going to get it done. That is very good work, and some of the goals are not even their fault. So our defensive line definitely held it down very well. Not only this game, but pretty much the whole playoffs.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Like, I mean, this defense, and again, we talk about preseason expectations. Like earlier, it's like one of the things we kind of talked about was the defense.
Remember that ball going over Mavinga's head in preseason? That was pretty fun. I remember talking about that.
I'd remember that, but yeah, but going back to the preseason, we were talking about that they were still getting scored a lot, and Greg Vanney's thing was like, oh, we got to cut these goals in half, and it's just like, well, it didn't look like we were cutting those goals in half, and when you look at just the playoffs in itself, we didn't even cut them in half. We cut it into like a small, you can say like a core. Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, it was more than that. So like the defense really showed up. And I even said going into these playoffs or in general in the final, I said the defense is going to be a big deal. That they needed to play their game how they've been playing, and seemingly they did. I mean, sure, the goal that they got scored on against New York was maybe it was preventable, but in terms of the whole playoffs in general, it was like they played excellent, and like you mentioned, some of those goals weren't even their fault. They were just, good strikes or whatever the case may be, or maybe another position kind of led into into those goals, but it wasn't necessarily the defensive fault. And so when you look at that, like I think the defense played just in general just phenomenal this late part in the season and the most important part of the season. And again, when you look at individual players, I mean, again, you look at McCarthy, again, we kind of talked about it in the beginning. Was he going to be this guy? He ended up being the guy for us the whole season. Mickey Yamane, again, we thought it was just sort of, we replaced one good right back with another good right back. And honestly, Mickey Yamane, like you can even make the argument, I don't know, maybe it might be a stretch, but you could make the argument maybe he was a better choice than Calegari. Who knows? Maybe you could make that argument. Maya Yoshida being the Iron Man this whole season, being our captain this whole season and playing the way he was playing was, definitely the leader that we needed. And then when you look at Garces, again, a guy who came in late, didn't necessarily play in the beginning and, made his way into the starting role. And I think that's very impressive in itself with so little time, and his future is going to be bright. John Nelson, again, being such a reliable piece that we didn't really have high expectation. Like, I think that's very, again, like his season has been great for us. And I think, and in that game, he also played very well. So it's like, the defense just in general has been great, the playoffs, but also just in general this last part of the season. And also, like, just to talk about the other defensive players too, like even the guys who necessarily didn't have enough playing time. You look at, guys like Jalen Neal, you look at guys like out there, like, some of those guys, it's like, sure, they maybe didn't have the season that we thought that they were going to have, or maybe they didn't even expect the season that they thought that they were going to have, but now they're getting, they I guess you can say they also had their moments to contribute as well. And, ultimately, like I said, like everybody played a part some way or another into the season. So you got to give, I guess, sort of a little bit of credit for the little stuff that some of those guys did too. You look at Cáceres, who ultimately got injured this season. He ends up, was playing some good minutes in the beginning. You look at Zavaleta, who had 1 or 2 games good in the beginning of the season. But in general, it's like, I think for the starting guys, like, I mean, they played great. And honestly, like the defense really, again, what they always say, defense wins championships. And clearly this one helped us win that championship for sure. But anything else you want to say about the defense before we move on?
I mean, yeah, Garcia's emergence has been really incredible, though. Like, it really just came out of nowhere, right? Like, we were just wondering where Garcia was the whole season, not playing the first, 11 to 12 games, not even a single minute. I think his first time playing for the Galaxy was seriously like 30 seconds where we were beating San Jose 3-0 in June. That was his first time playing for us. He was playing Ventura County a little bit, so we were just wondering, like, where is this guy? And then Jalen Neal, all of a sudden, he really struggles against LAFC and Portland in back-to-back games in a span of 3 days. Garces comes into the lineup, and it's like he never loses his spot again, and he pretty much plays impressive every single game. Like, the emergence has truly been incredible, and honestly, like, I know Brugman won Finals MVP, but they honestly very much could have gave it to Garces. I mean, some of the ways he was tracking back on the defenders, like I remember in the game, there was a chance where Lewis Morgan was almost through in on goal, and Garces is just so fast. He just came down to him and forced a pass. And all the times he cleared the ball out of our box using his athleticism, it's like, I don't know where this Garces came from. I truly can't explain it. I don't know where this came from at all. But ultimately, that played a massive part in the Galaxy being this good defensively throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And you look at, just sort of the deal when we signed Garces, it was going to be a loan, and then we ended up pulling the trigger on the buy anyways. And so, like, definitely for sure, it was definitely worth the buy at this point. So now we don't even have to worry about him going back anywhere. He's now with the Galaxy for next season, and he's going to be here for, I forget how many.
Starter.
Yeah, as a starter, but I was going to say, I forget how many, years we signed him for. Yeah, but yeah, I was going to say, I believe it was 5. So, he's going to be here for a while. So it's like, it's great to know that we have a player like him, coming back for this defense. And he's definitely going to be a starter 100% going into next season. But yeah, I mean, his resurgence has been, phenomenal for a player that we didn't know what was going to happen with. So definitely, and then again, like you mentioned it yourself, like he could have won Finals MVP as well, which, some people might have said, like, maybe he was robbed, but I don't know. Like, Brugman also deserved the Finals MVP as well for stepping up into a big game like that. But still, though, I think, yeah, defensively, just for everybody, again, defense was championships, and they helped us win that championship. So that's, that's something good to look at. Let's move into the midfield now. Let's look into the starters for the final before we talk about everybody else. But when you look at the finals, or when you look at the starters for the final, you had Edwin Cerrillo, you had Mark Delgado, and you had Gaston Brugman, which was, sort of the surprise going into this game, because we even talked about, in the last episode, who was going to be the guy who starts it for Ricky's place. Was it going to be Fagundes? Was it going to be Royce? Both of us ultimately said Fagundes should start. That didn't happen at all. Anyways, Gaston Brugman, ended up playing in that one, and he, gets finals or MLS Cup final MVP. But yeah, I mean, just in general, the midfield is going to play a big role into that game and in the final. And I guess you can say that they also, you can also say that they didn't really skip a beat in that department either. But how'd you feel about the midfield into that game and just in general?
Yeah, obviously the decision to start Gaston Brugman was made, I think Greg Vanney said it was on Monday, so very quickly after. So they had all week to train for that, to play that way. So at least Greg Vanney made the decision early, let the team know about it, so we got to get that out the way. And then, yeah, obviously I think the midfield played really well. Like, you put Brugman in there, and look, he massively stepped up. He kind of made, like I said earlier, a Ricky Pooch-esque pass where he just plays it through the defense and finds Joseph Paintsel running. That's the moment we were going to need missing a guy like Ricky Pooch. He definitely stepped up massively for us, which was great to see. Delgado obviously has championship experience. He was part of that Toronto team to win the treble, and he started an MLS Cup in those playoffs. So I think having Delgado in there was definitely really good. That definitely helped our midfield a lot. Even if he's not the most talented player on the field, like having that championship experience in there was definitely going to go a long ways for us. Then Cerrillo defensively was really good again. Like, that's another guy that we picked up last season in the trade market when we were a transfer ban. We got Cerrillo for $300K, and now he's the starter, basically the whole season, because Brugman wasn't really fit to ever start for a certain point in the season. And you see the way Cerrillo played all season for us, how he really supports our team, how he fits into our team, how he's still a young player and can develop really well. Like, Cerrillo was absolutely massive that game too. So overall, I think our midfield did a very good job. Offensively, probably in the second half, I feel like we were having a hard time really connecting any passes. But defensively, our midfield really did put in the work and made the big plays they needed to make, which helped us win the game.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I mean, you look, and again, you mentioned Gaston Brugman. He gets an assist for that first goal. Mark Delgado also gets an assist for that. I believe the second goal for Joveljic, although, I mean, really, Dejan took it all the way. But still, though, he gave the pass for him to able to take it all the way. It
was a good pass, too, actually.
It was a good pass, too. Like, but still, though, you look at those guys, they contributed offensively. Edwin Cerrillo, again, you look at him, like you mentioned, for a guy that we picked up last season, we said, okay, like, this is a guy that, maybe can transition to a starter. Even going into this season, we were saying, like, all right, who's going to be that starter? Is it going to be Brugman? Is it going to be Cerrillo? Is it going to be a, rotated type of deal, for some games? And yeah, like, obviously for Brugman, he gets injured and, maybe he didn't necessarily have the season that he wanted to, but, because of those injuries. But, Edwin comes in, and although he had some struggles here and there, he still came in and really developed as a player and developed being in that position. And again, we talk about the defensive ability that he has. It's good for the team. Something maybe Brugman maybe not necessarily was lacking, but maybe just he was definitely much better in the defensive ability that he had. And yeah, I mean, obviously Edwin Cerrillo, a guy who, like he said in the championship celebration, he's just a kid living his dream, and ultimately he took advantage of that dream. He took advantage of the opportunities that he got. And he was also a pretty big part of going into this final as well and going into that. And again, you mentioned Mark Delgado, championship experience, a Greg Vanney guy. Once we brought him in here, he ultimately knew what to do in this game and these type of games. And so Mark Delgado played a big part. And then, of course, Gaston Brugman being finals MVP, stepped up in a very big moment, made that Ricky Puig-esque pass to Joseph Painstill for the first goal. A guy who, again, like I said, was injured, maybe not had the season that he wanted, but still stepped up in the biggest part of the season and the best moment of the season to ultimately get us to that 6th title. So it's like you have to respect, Brugman in that sort of area and sort of why he won, the MVP for that game. And so I think, for him, him stepping up was pretty big. And again, you look at the other guys in the midfield. You look at Fagundes, who had a good season as well. Gave us some good moments. You look at, unfortunately, we haven't even talked about Ricky Puig yet, but Ricky Puig obviously, got us here, with that assist on a torn ACL. He got us here. The amazing season that he had. Criminal that he wasn't even listed as a finalist for MVP. And then ultimately, you look at guys like Marco Reus, who legendary player, comes into the Galaxy, gets his first league title as a player. That is massive as well. And you look at just, that sort of aspect in the midfield in general, like a lot of those guys really contributed coming into this spot, whether they started or not in this final. But, a lot of those guys really, and again, I think I said this before too, it's like the identity of the LA Galaxy in terms of those other championship winning teams has always been a good midfield. And the Galaxy these past few years has had a good midfield, and we knew that was sort of the reason why we could possibly win MLS Cup maybe sooner than later. And then we got it. Whether Ricky was in there or not, those guys stepped up, and I think that was pretty, massive for those guys in terms of, this season. Do you have anything else to add to the midfield before we move on?
Yeah, about Edwin Cerrillo, honestly, I'd say he's been one of the most improved Galaxy players in the second half of the season. Like, I really think towards, like, the end of the summer and throughout the fall, like, you talked about a little bit earlier in the first half of the season, maybe was a little bit more shaky, kind of had inconsistent performances. But in the second half of the season, I feel like he's really improved a lot and pretty much been really good almost every single game he's played in now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he really showed more improvement in the second half, and I think, again, we knew that he would be capable of possibly getting to this point. Obviously, again, when we looked at the inconsistency part, we were kind of maybe questioning a little bit. But I think, once he figured it out, like, he kind of just solidified his spot. And I talked about that too. It's just like, he really took advantage of, just the opportunity as well. Like, I mean, like, this is his, like, maybe it wasn't his completely first season as a starter, but he's got a lot of chances of being a starter this season. Hell, you even look at the first game against Miami when he played there, like he was getting on Messi at some points. He even almost fought him at one point. It's like, he had this mentality of just like, he really wanted to be there. He really wanted to prove himself. And I think, I don't want to say like that first Messi, like, I guess altercation, like really set the tone for him this whole season. But like when you look at that, it was, yeah, I mean, but when you look at that, it was just kind of like, okay, like you see what the kid cares, or I don't want to say kid because like we're the same age, but like the guy really, he cares. Like he really does want to prove himself to be in this league and to be the best he can be. So it's just like, and I think again, like even after those inconsistencies, he really proved himself to, be in that spot and have that, starting role. And I think you really got to appreciate like a player like Edwin Cerrillo.
I'd almost call him like the bulldog of the team in a sense.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, a bulldog just always gonna be there and, fight.
Tough-nosed one, yeah.
Yeah, the guy who's gonna be scrappy, I guess, always is gonna be there for his team, I guess, as well. Like he's gonna be a guy who's always gonna be there. And apparently, according to Ricky, he's also a toxic. I mean, but other than that, in terms of on the field, like, he's, he definitely has earned his spot there for sure. I don't know if you want to say anything else about the midfield before we move on into to the offense, but
We can move on.
all right then. Let's talk about the offense just in general, or obviously the starters of the final and just in general. You look at their front three; it's the front three that we've seen for this season. You had Gabriel Peck, you had Dejan Joveljic, and you had Joseph Paintstill. And again, when I talked about it earlier during the game, or when we're talking about the game, you look at Dejan and Joseph Paintstill, it's like just like two guys who we kind of had question marks at one point in the season. I mean, you look at Dejan in the beginning of the season and during the preseason, we were kind of like, all right, does he deserve to be a starter after what happened in 2023? Should we go out and find a backup striker, or at least a quality backup striker? Should we, are we going to regret, letting Billy Sharp go and things like that? It's just like, we didn't really know what Dejan was going to bring to us, although we've seen him do good things for us, in seasons past, but as a starter, we never really saw it. Again, this season has been great for him. He ends up scoring, has a phenomenal playoff run, first of all, scores in the final, gives us the winning goal. I mean, again, the amount of progression he has had just is phenomenal from him. You look at Joseph Paintstill, great start of the season, middle part, maybe even second part of the season, we were questioning him like, well, how is this guy going to be? We need this guy to be a game changer. We need this guy to, contribute like how he did in the beginning of the season. Again, and also great playoff run that he had, in terms of what he did, the goals that he had, game changing goals, which is something that we were kind of saying, like, when's he going to be a game changer? Had game changing moments in these playoffs, including into this final, setting the tone, for ultimately getting that sixth trophy. Again, two guys where you look at had question marks, ultimately just comes up in the biggest moments. Gabriel Peck overall this season, phenomenal. Maybe didn't have necessarily the best finals performance, had some chances as well, but still a guy that we have to appreciate because he has gotten us to this point into this winning season. But how'd you feel about the offense and about the final in general? What were your thoughts about it?
Yeah, the offense, they made the plays they needed to make ultimately, and that's what it came down to. We got the goals we needed to get to. Joseph Paintstill has a perfectly timed run in behind, to get the opening goal. Great vision from Brugman. We convert on that. And then Joveljic, biggest play of the season, honestly. Not only biggest play of the season, biggest play in the last 10 years, taking it through the Red Bulls defense and then finding the bottom corner to give us a 2-0 lead, which ultimately would be the decisive goal in MLS Cup. I mean, look, Joveljic, he talked his shit through past seasons. Like, I'm the future. And like, okay, Peck is going to be like extremely closely monitored. Now that's going to free up space and opportunities for other guys like Paintstill and Joveljic to be able to have more opportunities, and then credit to them. They took those opportunities, and that's why we won the game and won the championship.
Yeah, definitely. They took advantage of those opportunities and game changing moments as well. I mean, but again, and you kind of talked about it yourself, man. Like Dejan Joveljic, I mean, what a playoff run, man. And you even said it, like, it's a legacy run too. It's like this is something that you're never gonna forget from him. It's like when you talk about legends before and players before and their moments and their runs, it's like Joveljic kind of stamped his way into that I guess, like, sort of moments of the LA Galaxy history. So it's like for him, it's like, yeah, it's the way we talked about him going into the season to now. It's just like, it's great to see, man. And this is what we've always wanted from Dejan, right? To be the guy, to be the starter, like you said, to be the future of the LA Galaxy, and the future is now. Like, I mean, he got us our sixth cup, so it's like, yeah, man, it's honestly been surreal for Dejan Joveljic, and again, an amazing season. And again, Paintstill, even when we had our doubts, still manages to find a way to be productive in the playoffs, and that's where you need it most. And then Peck, again, still phenomenal season overall, even though these last two games maybe wasn't the best. And like you said, maybe it wasn't necessarily on him. It was just more of the fact that they were really on him. And again, if you're that good, that's how good of a player you are. It's like, if people are just going to be always on you, that kind of tells you something about the way you play. I mean, great for them. When you look at other players as well, like if we mentioned Diego Fagundes, I mean, there was one point where we didn't have, Joseph Paintstill of injury, or we didn't have Peck because he was off getting married or whatever. He stepped up as well during the season.
Time again.
Yeah, time and time again, man. Like, I mean, that was the crazy streak, right? Like 11, whenever he started, like we always win. I think it was like 11 straight games or whatever. I forget the exact number, but again, Diego Fagundes being this reliable guy for us as well. I mean, shit, we even talked about the trade talks that we had at that one point, right? That you were saying maybe we should trade him, but luckily we didn't. And here he is, also getting his, MLS Cup. And even after 10 years when we beat him, winning that, winning the cup. And now, like he said himself, if you can't beat him, you join him, right? So we're glad that he's here with us. And he also had contributing moments. And I mean, just in general, yeah, you look at players like him. I mean, obviously, maybe not, maybe we didn't necessarily talk about him, maybe not necessarily in a good light, but Miguel Berry, I guess, had some clutch goals, here and there around the season, even though it wasn't a lot. Obviously, you look at players like that. I'm trying to think of other offensive players that we have now. Obviously, you look at Marco Reus. I mean, we kind of talked about him in the midfield as well. He also helped out in that sort of aspect here and there. I guess you can also add Ricky Puig in there. I mean, even though he was a midfielder, definitely was 100% part of that offense. And yeah, man, again, it's just like you look at players like that. Again, it's not only just about the starters; it's about everybody else also. There representing the, whether I guess you can say the bench players in some sense. It's like there's a lot of people who really did contribute to this. But in terms of the offense this season, I mean, phenomenal. I mean, we scored a lot of goals. We scored a lot of goals in the playoffs, setting a new record in the playoffs. I think we tied our season record in terms of goals scored this year. So it's like, you look at that. So, I mean, yeah, man, like it's honestly just, again, great for that side of the ball and definitely for sure something that we've always wanted to see as well.
All right, so transitioning a little bit, like something I wanted to ask you a little bit is, and I'll answer it too, it's sort of about legacies, and I'll start with, one player. For Ricky Puig, joining the LA Galaxy in 2022 when we were pretty crap at the time, we were in 9th place. We were in a desperate need of a 10. He takes the Galaxy from 9th place all the way to 4th place. The team looks just a lot better. And that is with the Galaxy all of last season. Obviously, we were just absolutely shit. We didn't have the supporting pieces around him. We didn't really, have much go in that whole year anyways. And then this season, playing with the Galaxy the entire year, playing really well, having an absolutely sensational playoffs this year. Should be in MVP talks, definitely one of the best players in the league against Colorado, Minnesota, Seattle. He was all sensational. Unfortunately, he couldn't play the final, but we all know, he's the only reason we're here, and, he was definitely a massive part in what we were trying to do. After being with the Galaxy, kind of being that sort of, stepping stone, our new franchise player, our real franchise player, kind of after, I guess, Zlatan left a little bit, more serious and young than Chicharito was, where do you think he would rank among Galaxy players all time? Is it 4th best after Keane, Donovan, and Beckham? Is it top 5 after Kobe Jones? He was such a massive part of this run. After delivering a championship for the first time in 10 years, after the last 10 years we were pretty, mediocre to average if you're trying to be generous. It's where would you place him all time?
That is a tough question, man. And I think there's been a lot of great Galaxy players, right? I mean, it's very, I don't know, man. It's very tough because it's how do you
This is one of our best championships though in the modern MLS though. You gotta take that into context too.
No, yeah, we're 100%. And I think you also look at, just in general, the 10-year drought that we have and him being a really big piece into bringing that back. Yeah. So it's just when you look at Ricky Puig, it's obviously this was his 3rd season, right? You could say almost 2.5 because when he came in 22, it was during the summer window. I mean, honestly, man, it's just the thing is that he's already done so much, but he's going to do a lot more if he stays with us, right? The more, even when he comes back from injury and then after that, it's just yeah, man, it's I mean, I would definitely think he'd be in the top 10, don't you think? I mean, maybe, yeah.
Top 5 even.
Okay, that's interesting. But I think, well, definitely for sure top 10. I think he's definitely in there. But now, obviously, am I thinking in 15 years' time, is he going to get a statue in Legends Plaza? I mean, I don't know about that, right? So it's but I mean, still though, Ricky Puig is just I mean, I don't know. The story of Ricky Puig is also just great too. It's you also have to look at that. It's I mean, you look at a guy, Barcelona Academy player, was with Barcelona for the first team. Xavi, who was the coach at the time, didn't really have plans for him. Chose to go to MLS, said, forget Europe. Let me go find myself somewhere else where maybe not a lot of people are going to, maybe not watch me. How would I explain this? It's let me go find myself in a place where not everybody would expect me to go. And that was MLS, right? He could have gone to other teams in Europe at that time. He could have maybe stayed in La Liga with some, mid-table team or whatever. It's maybe he could have done that, but he decided to go to Major League Soccer, have I guess you can almost say take a risk coming here and he was a big part of to what we're at right now. And so it's like, I think for sure Ricky Puig is top 10 for sure. I mean, I don't know about top 5 yet. I mean, obviously I would like to hear your case on why that would be the reason why, but definitely for sure has to be in the top 10. Maybe you could almost say top 7. I wouldn't put him on the lower part of that tier. So it's like, but yeah, I mean, definitely for sure he's stamped his legacy here with the Galaxy. But I want to hear you, like, your, I guess, your opinion on why he'd be on the in the top 5.
Arguably, I'm not completely sure on it, but I'm saying there's a really good case for it. And that's because, like, first of all, I think he's one of the most talented players we've ever had. When you've watched, I haven't watched every single Galaxy team. Obviously, I've been a fan since 2012, so I didn't really get to watch previous players before it like that. But I still think he's one of the most talented players we've ever had, just ability wise. Like, there's not many players we've had that can do what he's done. And, like, I think this makes it more special because, like, we've struggled for 10 years. Like, when Kobe Jones won it, it's like we were kind of a newer team to the league, or Cienfuegos, guys like that, we were like a newer team to the league. But Ricky Puig kind of did it when, the club was struggling a lot, when it wasn't easy. I rate him very highly because he stayed with the Galaxy. Like, when it was very easy for him to leave, like, he could have been like last season when things were just going down, like, okay, I'm getting the fuck out of here. This is, a waste of my time. And to be honest, he would have had every right to do that. But he stayed with the Galaxy, he pushed through it. He won a modern MLS Cup in this era of MLS, which I think is obviously more difficult with a lot of the teams in the league. It kind of changed the narrative about the Galaxy a little bit. Like, the narrative around the club was, yeah, they have a lot of success, a lot of history, but, in the last 10 years, like, what have they done? They haven't won anything, which, I mean, was kind of fair to an extent. It's like when you're a big club that hasn't won a trophy in that long, you're going to get criticism from people. And the fact that he led the team to, doing that, to changing that narrative, like when they were during that era too, is like, I just rate it so highly, honestly, which is why when you base it off his ability and the narratives and challenges he had to face to get to this point with us, I think it pushes him above most players.
Yeah, I can see that as well. And honestly, like, yeah, you look at the talent wise, it's funny when we signed him and once they, we saw what he was capable of doing. I think a lot of people had always said we haven't had a solid 10 since Cienfuegos, like, or we haven't had a good, like, talented player since, like, Cienfuegos, like, or like I would always hear that sometimes, but it's just like, yeah, I mean, obviously, and also you talk about, like, I guess the sort of the narrative shifting, right? It's like we talked about, the Galaxy, being this team to sign the old veteran guys for on DP player or DP level contracts, the really, guys who are in Europe now in their later years. Like, I mean, Ricky is at the time came in here at 22, 21 years old, I believe. I think it was 22 years old. And a talent like that. And again, like I mentioned, it's like he could have gone to Europe. He could have stayed, or he could have stayed in Europe and gone to some other team. But it's just like, bringing a talent like that also really shifted the way things run. And even then, that was like a pre Will Kuntz signing, right? Like, I mean, Will Kuntz wasn't here at the time when we signed Ricky. So, but it's like, I think that also kind of shifted into like, hey, like if we can find players like a Ricky Puig, that can go a long way into winning a championship. Because you're right, you talk about, I guess, sort of the modern MLS. It's like, it's not always about the big stars or stars who are from Europe, like
Messi.
Like, yeah, or like Messi. I mean, obviously, I was gonna say, obviously, there's some certain extents or differences. I guess, like Messi, like obviously, I think anybody would sign Messi, like no matter what. It's like, or you even look at guys like Zlatan. It's like, sure, he was on the older side, but clearly he was still like a monster above everybody. But it's just like now we're kind of shifting the focus. It's like you don't have to sign guys like that every time to have success. It's like now you got to start finding guys like a Ricky Puig, like a Gabriel Peck, for example, as well, who are young, promising stars who can get you to this point of winning an MLS Cup, and they could also even, put themselves into a position where they can go to higher levels like a European team, which, by the way, like Gabriel Peck has already had interest in, supposedly per reports, right? So it's like, you look at things like that. So I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously Ricky Puig, like, I mean, in terms of just his legacy, like, obviously his legacy is stamped here forever, no matter what. But, I mean, yeah, I mean, it is interesting to kind of stack him into I guess, the tier list of, the most, I guess, the best players that we've had into this one. Again, like, maybe, not right now, maybe we're not saying that he's going to have a statue in Legends Plaza in, like, 15, 20 years' time. But, as of right now, like, obviously I think his legacy has stamped himself, like, forever. Yeah, definitely, for sure. But I mean, again, that is interesting to think about too. But yeah, I still think he's top 10, maybe more into the top 7 in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And like you mentioned earlier, like our just for me, like our approach to this season has been such a breath of fresh air for me. Like I was so tired of signing guys like Douglas Costa, Chicharito. Yeah, obviously Zlatan was a massive success, but like he was still kind of an old name. Steven Gerrard, like Gio dos Santos. Like the fact that this season we kind of like brought in a general manager, Will Kuntz, who's like, you know what, the Galaxy have been pretty crap the last, 6 or 7 years. Like it's time to shake things up a little bit. We're not just gonna go for the old, European name towards the end of their career. We're gonna do something different a little bit. We're gonna bring in someone like Gabriel Peck. We're gonna bring in someone like Joseph Painsil. We're gonna completely turn around the career of Dejan Joveljic and have make him have a career year. We're gonna utilize the talent that Ricky Puig is. Like even the signings we just made, it just felt like it was so refreshing to see it wasn't like a Douglas Costa or a Steven Gerrard. It was like we got guys like Gabriel Peck and Joseph Painsil, which just felt like such modern MLS signings and just such good signings for any club. Like I think any club in MLS would have liked to have those signings on their team. And the fact that we went that direction and just very satisfying overall because it's something I wanted to see for years before we finally did it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of people were kind of asking for that. It's like, when are we going to make?
Like I
Oh,
wanted
excuse
to
me.
win. I didn't want names. I wanted to just win.
No, exactly, for sure. It's like we didn't need the names. It's like, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like, when were we going to make those signings where it wasn't just necessarily a big name? It was, when are we going to make these signings that are going to impact the team and ultimately help us win games and win a championship? So it's like, again, I can understand that the, beginning MLS era, the first half of MLS so far. I mean, we're heading into our 30th season, or this next season is season 30 for MLS. So it's like, when you look at, I guess you can say the first 15 seasons, yes, it was like, you could bring the old name guys, or you could bring those type of guys. I mean, shit, you look at, us, like, I mean, we brought in guys like a Beckham, right? We brought in guys like you, maybe you can even say like Robbie Keane to a certain extent. It's like Robbie Keane was still in his later years and still came here. It's like, and you even look at the beginning days, right? Like we brought Jorge Campos, we brought, like, it's like there's so many names we can think about, but it's just like, it worked in that sort of era. But now with more teams coming in, with teams having more ambitions and finding new ways to win, the Galaxy for a while just had a problem shifting into that new version. And so, and obviously you can look at a lot of things. You can look at the way it was run. You can look at some of the players that we brought in, and it's like, you can look at a lot of things. And honestly, like, now that we're shifting into, into the same realm as like what other teams are doing, it's just like, that's what we need to do. And I think that's sort of a reason that's sort of a thing when it comes to, like, I guess you can say big clubs, right? Like I think I said it last year when we were talking about the Columbus Crew. It's like, the reason why I always say the Columbus Crew, I consider them a big club, is not only just because of the championships that they have, but also because of when they won them. They won them in different eras. They won it in the very, in 2007, in a very early, I guess you can say, early age of MLS. They won it during COVID, which was, I mean, again, no matter what you can say about COVID years, it's just like, it was still a little era in itself. And then they won it in 2023. And then, it's like, things like that, right? It's like they won it in different times of the league. So it's like, I think that's also important when it comes to that sort of aspect of it. And now we were just kind of waiting for the Galaxy to do that. It's like, when are we going to win in this sort of era of the modern MLS? And then now, here we are. We did it. So I think that was sort of the good thing about the whole thing about winning, and shifting our mentality into that.
It is crazy too, though. Like we signed Gabriel Peck. Like it really is insane how good he's been. Like 37 goal contributions in MLS. Like think about it. If he didn't miss the first season due to his wedding in the Brazil national team camp, the dude's hitting 40 goal contributions his first season in MLS. That's crazy, bro. Honestly, it's like you almost look at that signing and you're just like, man, how did we sign that caliber of player to this club? Like that's such like a good signing to make. And look, I always liked the signing because he had a lot of production in the Brazilian league. And one thing I've always said is I think the Brazilian league is the best league in the world outside of Europe. So if you can have, production and success in that league, you could definitely have it in MLS. But still, to almost have 40 goal contributions your first year in MLS is like, you couldn't ask for much more, really.
Yeah, I mean, new league, new system. I mean, that's sort of, that's pretty
Imagine next year,
impressive.
too, with a full preseason.
Yeah, exactly, right. So it's like, for him, it's been very impressive. And honestly, like, you look, and again, you look at the beginning of the season, just new environment, new place, new team, just in general, it's just like, just for him, it's like you never really expected it, had a slow start, and then just sort of found his way in. And yeah, man, like he's proved it himself. And you got to give credit to guys like, even guys behind the scenes like Juninho, right? Like Juninho was a big help into Gabriel Peck's, the way he is. Obviously, he's a Brazilian, Galaxy legend, some guy a guy who knows how to win, who's part of championship teams, and helped Gabriel Peck be in this position. I mean, can you imagine if Douglas Costa was still here and he has to? That's his mentor. It's like I wouldn't trust that. Like we had someone
Hey, go punch this dude.
yeah, it's like we have someone like Juninho who's on here who's gonna help a player like Gabriel Peck. So it's like like I think that's just sort of a thing that you have to look at too. The guys behind the scenes as well, like the coaching staff, and you look at when we talked about last year as well. It's like we talked about the coaching staff, we talked about the medical staff as well. We didn't have that many injuries this year, so it's like yeah, it was definitely a lot better this year. So it's like you got to give credit to everybody behind the scenes as well. And I think we have to take give a little bit of a shout out to those guys as well for sure. But I mean, yeah, I mean the way that just everything has been run so far from the front office, the shift that we've had has been great. And I think another thing I want to add on to as well, I mean, we talked about, I guess, sort of the academy a little bit, and I didn't realize this until when they did the celebration last week, was that there's been a few academy guys on this team. I mean, you look at guys like Jalen Neal, Cuevas. Sure, he went to Club Bruges, like for a little bit, but he was still part of the academy. Came back. You look at guys like Ruben Ramos, who was maybe not necessarily the biggest, I guess, piece into the first team, but still had success in Ventura County and stuff like that. But still, though, he was on the team. I forget another academy player though. I think those were the only three players, I believe. But still, though, like there were still a couple academy player guys as well that were in here and had some. At least Cuevas and Neal had some moments in the season. So it's like I think that's also another thing we could look at as well that I think was pretty impressive in sort of the shift on how the organization has been run.
Yeah, so two more things I'm going to add, then we can move on. So, like, Joveljic, too, like, obviously last year scored, like, 5 goals, 2 garbage time goals. Just a very rough season. But then overall this year, he scored 20-plus goals in the regular season and then scored, I think, 6 goals in the playoffs. So I would just ask you and you look at the goals he scored in the playoffs, too. Opening the scoring versus Colorado. Giving us the lead back versus Minnesota, scoring in the Western Conference Finals to send us to MLS Cup, and then scoring the game-winning goal in MLS Cup, the goal that would be the decisive goal for us. And you kind of just look at these moments. It's like, you also, the season earlier too, in the Derby, we were down 2-0, and Joveljic scored 2 goals, one to cut it to 2-1, then one to give us a 3-2 lead. So, like, would you say, like, well, obviously it's true, but does Joveljic, like, legacy-wise officially have the title as a big game player for the LA Galaxy? Like, I think he definitely does. Because, like, even in the past, like, even in 2022, he scored a lot of really big goals for us, like, in the playoffs versus LAFC. To clutch times during regular season games. Like, he's officially, like, a legacy big game player for the Galaxy now. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. If this season doesn't tell you that, I don't know what will. But yeah, I mean, obviously he cemented himself as that. And I know we had some questions about him preseason, and I know we kind of even had questions about him this season in terms of availability. But I mean, even with the moments that he's had, he's still been very productive for us. He's still been that guy for us. And honestly, yeah, he cemented himself as a big player for this Galaxy, like for the Galaxy.
Big game riser.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely for sure. It's like even when he was a super sub, still gave you those moments, had a tough transition being a starter. But this season, we trusted him. Will Kuntz trusted him. Greg Vanny had trust in him, and he got back to that, to what he was in those first couple seasons, but now as a starter. So, yeah, I mean, Dejan Joveljic has cemented himself as a big player for this team. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I don't think, like I said, if this season didn't tell you that, I don't know what will, because that's going to be very tough to convince you if you don't think that he's not a big player for this team.
I mean, I think he had like the most playoff goals, or I think he tied Robbie Keane since like 2012 for the most playoff goals in Galaxy history. It was something like crazy.
Yeah, or actually, I don't know if I don't know the stat off the top of my head, or at least I didn't see it. But I mean, regardless, I mean, 6 goals in these playoffs, and the way he performed,
a lot of huge goals too.
Yeah, a lot of huge goals in these playoffs. I mean, the winning goal for the Western Conference Final, the winning goal for the final. I mean, it's like those are 2 big goals and 2 clutch goals that you're gonna need from a player like Joveljic. So I think for me, it's like, yeah, he cements himself as a big player for this team. And I think, and again, when you look at legacy stamping, like he's definitely, stamped his legacy for this club for years to come.
I mean, basically you had Joveljic on a DP contract without actually having him on a DP contract. He was giving you DP level production, which was massive for this team.
Yeah, I mean, definitely for sure. So it's like, yeah, I mean, again, it was really crazy to think like the way he had this. But yeah, I mean, he's giving you DP level production and not on a DP level
It's
contract.
actually
So
better than most DP strikers last season.
yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like, again, and that's sort of the thing. It's like maybe it's not necessarily the name that you gotta go look for in terms of these like contracts, but it's just the player and what they can provide for you,
And
and
the fit.
yeah, and the fit too. So clearly for Dejan, he found himself in this season, and I think we're all proud of him for what he's done this season, and in terms of what happened last season, and then now to this one, where I think we're all proud of him for what he's done.
All right, two more things. And this one's for Greg Vanney. Like, what do you think this means for him as a coach? Obviously, he's the only, managerial wise, he's the only manager in MLS history to win the treble, winning the Canadian Championship, the Supporters Shield, MLS Cup, all in the same year in 2017. Only manager to ever do that. I know the Canadian Championship's not the US Open Cup, but I mean, Toronto FC, that's what they got to play in. So he won what he had to win. He won everything there. It's like the fact that he did that, had that incredible season. Has been to three other MLS Cups, won the conference three times, been to like three MLS Cups in 5 years, and then does it on a different club. A struggling club like LA Galaxy comes in after 2020, after Schelotto, when the club was kind of a mess. He comes in here, he tries to turn it around, has a hard time under Klein, eventually gets the right pieces, and then Greg Vanney's a champion again. Now he's a two-time MLS Cup champion. Been to four MLS Cups now, 2-2 record in MLS Cups. The fact that Greg Vanney, had that trouble winning season and then delivered another MLS Cup after that, like, what do you think that means, like, for him as a coach? Because I think that means a lot. It proved that that trouble winning season wasn't just a fluke, that he's like this legit all-time winning MLS manager now.
Even if he didn't win MLS Cup, I don't think his trouble winning season would necessarily be a fluke, but I get what you mean. It's just sort of like maybe we were kind of thinking like, hey, maybe is Greg Vanney sort of a little bit maybe washed in this sort of in terms of that, or like maybe was he the right guy? I mean, we were questioning that last year. Whether like we were questioning the fact that was he going to be the guy, and I think what really changed everything was him not being the general manager anymore, the general manager head coaching pairing that he had, right? Like we even said it last year. We were like, if Greg Vanney can just let go of the general manager part of the whole thing, I think he'll be a much better coach. Focus more on the team and what the team needs to do to play better and to be better. And I think that really changed everything. And I know like last year I was kind of like, I don't know how likely that is for that to happen, because once you have that role, it's like you're just not going to give it up. It's like I'm the general manager as well. Like I'm not just going to easily give that up, but Greg Vanney had, I guess you could say, the balls to actually be like, hey, I realize I don't need to be signing players while also trying to manage them at the same time. It's like, I got to just focus on the team. And I think him giving those rights to Will Kuntz to be the full manager or full general manager, I think really changed everything for him. And again, I think Greg Vanney I think he was the right coach for the Galaxy, right? Like from the beginning. You look at the first season, unlucky in terms of why we didn't make the playoffs. We make the playoffs the second year. It was, okay, that's a good step in the right direction. Last year, although we were questioning him, you can also say that, hey, it was a bad year for the club in general. You had the boycotts, you had injuries. There's not much that Greg Vanney could have done in those situations. So I think for him, he was sort of, I think I've always had faith in Greg Vanney, although I had this very kind of like really hot take going into this season saying like, hey, if he doesn't get to the Western Conference final, I think we should get rid of him. I mean, luckily he did, but at the same time, it's just like, I think he was always kind of the right guy for the job. I think there was just moments where he didn't have, I guess maybe he was unlucky in some sort of sense, but still though, I think Greg Vanney proved a lot of people of what he can do coaching wise. I think he was robbed in terms of being coach of the year this year. I think when you look at the other candidates, and yes, they were good candidates as well. You look at Martino, you look at Wilfred Nancy, you look at Chris Armas, like, yes, they were good candidates, but they weren't Greg Vanney. Greg Vanney was, made a 13th, team in the Western Conference into the MLS Cup champions. Like, yes, we could talk about Will Kuntz and what he has done as well, but you still have to manage the team. You still have to manage players, and not only just on the field, but off the field. It's like Greg Vanney has done a lot for this year. And so I think for him, it's just like, again, I think he got robbed this year for coach of the year, but I think for his legacy, I think he, again, player and now coach, like, I mean, again, he was the right guy. I think he was the right guy. It just took a little bit of time and a little bit of hurdles and obstacles in the way to get us to this point.
That's fair. That's fair. So the last question I would ask you is like, let's talk about the team now. So this LA Galaxy team in the playoffs outscored teams 18-4. So we can talk about this team all time in MLS history. Like, do you think this is not only an all time LA Galaxy team, which I mean, it definitely is. It's one of the 6 teams to win a championship, so you're always going to remember this team. Like I said before, the finals get to determine if it's a legacy team or just another great team that probably won't be all time. Well, they won the finals, so they're a legacy team now. But even throughout MLS history, most goals in playoff history, outscoring teams 18-4 in the playoffs, just absolutely incredible. And we look at some of the players we had: Ricky Puig, Dejan Jovic, Gabriel Peck, Joseph Paintsell, guys like Cerrillo and Delgado in the midfield to support him with this also, elite defense in the playoffs, being this dominant. Do you think this is one of the top teams also in MLS history? Like, I don't know if it's like top 3 or 4, but I think it's like a top maybe 6 to 7 team in MLS history for sure. When you look at how explosive they were offensively.
That's tough for me, to be honest, to think about. Because I mean, if you also have to look at a lot of things. You also have to look. I mean, obviously, like you mentioned, it's like you look at the playoff record. I mean, you look at the players. I mean, shit. We had 4 players to have 10+ goals this season. Rare. Yeah, I mean, the first team to do that. The first team to do that with 4 players to have 10+ goals on the season. But also, it's not like we did win the Supporter Shield, so you kind of have to look at that as well. Because, like, I mean, if we had the most points and maybe even broke the record, it's like, okay, it's just like maybe that's a plus into that factor as well. But it's like, I don't know. That's a tough question.
18-4 though in the playoffs, 8-4.
But if you look at obviously, if you look at the playoffs, I mean, if you look at playoff records and playoff teams, 100% this team has to be up there. But I think in general, for a full season, regular season plus playoffs, I think that's maybe where you kind of have to think about it a little bit more. I mean, if we're strictly talking about the playoffs, 100% this team has to be in there in the top 10, maybe even top 5. But it's just like, I don't know in terms of just the whole season in general, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I know. But like the LA Galaxy organization in general hasn't always been like a full in on the regular season sort of franchise. I feel like we've always been like, okay, we'll be in the mix in the regular season, we'll be in a good spot, and then come the playoff time, we'll kind of raise our game to another level. I feel like that our franchise has always kind of operated in that sort of way.
Which is fair. I think that's fair as well. But I think you also kind of have to look at those other things as well, as like, because like if you look at teams who have won the Supporters Shield plus the championship or plus the MLS Cup, I think you have to put those type of teams up there, right? It's like, in fact, even the Galaxy were one of those teams. 2011, right? 2011, 2012. Yeah, it's 2011. So it's like 2011, that definitely 100% one of the best teams of all time in this league. But it's just like, so I think you have to look at teams like that as well. So it's like, I don't know. I think it's a little bit more tougher in terms of collecting them as a whole. But I think if we're talking about just playoffs, 100% this team has to be, top 5 in that sort of aspect. So yeah, that was just that's just for me though. I don't know how you felt about that though.
I would say they're a little bit higher just because of like what you said, the first team in MLS history to have 4 guys score 10 goals. You look at the quality of players we have. Like, this Galaxy team kind of reminds me of that like 2018 Atlanta team, which also that team only won the Cup. They didn't win the Supporters Shield. They didn't win the US Open Cup. Obviously, we didn't even have a chance to play in the US Open Cup this year. But still, like, just a team that won the Cup. But like, you just look at that roster and it's like, it's just so talented. And then you see their playoff dominance they had. Like, when you combine like the overall talent and the playoff dominance, like, I just have them ranked very high all time because of like what they can bring to the table versus pretty much anybody you want to put them up against.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. I mean, but again, again, I think just in general, like, I think those are fair points, but just for me, I think it's still a little bit tough to kind of consider those teams. But like you said, like the Galaxy are those type of teams that necessarily don't go full in on the season, don't go full in on the Supporters Shield, but it's just like, I don't know, like I feel like you kind of have to like kind of take that into consideration as well. But again, I think you still make some.
Look at it.
Yeah, I think it's just the way you look at it as well. But those are still valid points. But I think again, strictly playoff team, I think 100% this is a top 5 team for sure. But yeah, man, I mean this team, I think regardless though is gonna get remembered. But I mean, it's just like, I don't know, like it's very like we can talk a lot about legacy and stuff like that, but it's just like, right now, I'm kind of only just thinking about the MLS Cup, the fact that we just got it. But I understand, though. Like, I mean, in due time in the future, once, again, we can talk about this I mean, I don't know if we'll talk about this 10 years from now, but in 10 years from now, like if you have a conversation about this, then we'll really decide. It's like, has this been one of the best teams? Like, cause we just came out fresh off of it. So it's like kind of hard to judge right here and right now, I guess, if that makes sense as well.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. But yeah, man, I mean, honestly, still a crazy season though for the Galaxy. And I think this is a team that's going to be remembered as, remembered forever. I mean, it's really hard to say that this team's not going to get remembered. And I think with all the players and all the pieces, yeah, man, it really is going to be a team to remember for sure. I don't know I don't think you asked me in terms of all-time Galaxy teams, but how would you rate this team in terms of all-time Galaxy teams?
That's a very tough question, honestly. Like, I don't know, like, the Galaxy were a dynasty before. That's why it's kind of tough to rank them. Like, they won the title in 2011, 2012, and 2014, 3 titles in 4 years, and a Supporters' Shield. Definitely one of the best dynasties, if not the best dynasty in MLS history. It's kind of hard to say. I don't think they're better than that team because it's just one championship. You're not going to put them over that. But, like, probably other than that team, probably the next best team we've had, honestly, when you look at talent-wise and the way they're just so explosive and the different ways we're able to win. Like, I think that's a very important part, too. Like, we just won an MLS Cup final without arguably one of the best players in MLS not named Messi. Like, that's a huge deal. We won the MLS Cup final without one of the best players in the league. So you look at the versatility this roster has, the many different ways they're capable of playing, ways of winning, the depth this team has, the coaching improvement we've seen with this team. It's like, honestly, probably just behind the Beckham, Keane, Donovan Galaxy, it's probably the next best team we've had.
That's fair enough. And I think it's very hard to talk about, to put those teams in front of those teams. It's just like, like you mentioned, they're a dynasty. So I think
the Keane, Donovan, Beckham Galaxy is probably the best team in MLS history, in my opinion, when you look at the body of work they've done.
Yeah, for sure. But, I guess in terms of right now, it's like, yeah, it's like I think you would put them behind those guys because it's just the amount of talent that we have right now. And which is another thing as well, like that I liked about the MLS Cup final, seeing a lot of the alumni coming back, seeing guys like Donovan there, seeing guys like Robbie Keane.
Where was Beckham?
A lot of I don't know, man. I thought Beckham would have showed up. I thought he was too. I thought he would have showed up, but I guess not. I mean, I guess he's really focusing in on Miami right now, but still though, like, I mean, you still got to see a lot more alumni in there. I think a lot of the 2014 guys were in there. Like, obviously Juninho was on the field, like actually, being, as an assistant. But I mean, and just in general, the coaching staff has a lot of alumni. I mean, you look at, Kevin Hartman, you look at Dan Kalichman, I mean, Greg Vanney, obviously. So it's like, there's a lot of alumni that was there, and, still definitely for sure. It was great to see a lot of those legends and those guys who were, part of this club to come back and be a part of this moment as well. And also shout out to Donovan for actually wearing a Ricky Pooge jersey and then Ricky Pooge sort of showing the favor back. But yeah, man, like honestly though, it's just like, again, this team's going to be remembered forever, but I think we also have to thank those guys who came before them. But yeah, I mean, definitely for sure that team is going to get remembered forever, in terms of that.
I thought Vadam was going to show up too. I was kind of surprised to see he wasn't there.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised about that. I don't know. I mean, I knew it was going to be a long shot, but I was kind of like, what if Zlatan shows up? Like, what if he actually...
That's true. I was kind of thinking about that too, but I'm like, nah. He wasn't here long enough.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't here long enough. I don't know how much of a relation he had, I guess, with the Galaxy, I guess, in that sort of sense. So it's just like, but I thought, like, as a long shot, I was like, maybe he shows up. You never know. But he didn't end up showing up, I guess. But yeah, I mean, obviously, still though, it's good to see those alumni and to see seeing these guys win the championship. And I think that it brought a lot of memories for those guys. But yeah, though, yeah, I guess that's, what's it called? I guess another thing too, though, in terms of like asking you a question, I guess in terms of this season, like, how are you going to remember this season? Like, how is this going to be, like, because, like, after the season, or, like, once the final whistle blew and just sort of everything happened, I was kind of like, I'll never forget this, like, this season, and in terms in general for the MLS Cup final, I was like, I'll never forget this day, but, like, it's kind of like, how are you always going to remember this team? Just, like, forget about the, the past teams and stuff like that, just this team in general. It's like, how are you going to remember this team in this season?
Well, obviously, I'm going to remember this team as the first team to bring the LA Galaxy back to glory since Klein got fired. I mean, Klein got fired last year. It was a massive deal. The rest of the season in 2023, we kind of figured we were going to struggle, especially after all the injuries. Like, you kind of figured it was, Klein being fired was kind of a bigger deal more for next season. Then obviously to see, him fire the pieces we brought in, to see the wave of the momentum from the fans, the positivity, and then, the team kind of having a reset button after him being gone. Like it's gonna be remembered as the team that officially brought the LA Galaxy back and officially, rode the momentum from the fans that officially lifted this team to the top.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I think that's how I'm gonna remember it too. Is just being the guys who brought us back. Like, I mean, really, it just really, like, I mean, there's no other way I guess you can say it. It's the guys who brought us back. It's the guys who brought us back to the mountaintop. And again, I think this team's always going to be remembered. And I think just for that, obviously, again, you look at the season, it's still amazing regardless. But it's just like, for bringing us back to where we were, I think that's a big deal for us, for this team. And I think I'll just never forget that. And again, I'll never forget the day. Like, for me, it was my first MLS Cup final. Going to in the stadium, seeing the guys win a trophy, I think was a special moment. Going to see it, like obviously, I had a friend coming with me, my friend Victoria. Shout out to her. She was with me almost the whole playoffs. But also just in general, like a lot of the people that I go see at the stadiums, like seeing those guys in the supporter sections, seeing some of my buddies there, bringing buddies who necessarily weren't Galaxy fans into the games, and they were there this season as well. I look at guys like that. I look at my family who also went to the game. Fun fact, actually, I don't know if you saw if you were looking at the pregame stuff, but there was a family who had won a Home Depot gift card that day at the MLS Cup final. That was my family. So like my mom, my dad, my nephew, my brother were there, so they won that thing. That was pretty cool, and I think that's something that they'll never forget. But it's just like, just in general, the Galaxy community, right? Like, I mean, I said it in the beginning of the show. It's like we've done this for 4 seasons. We started our pages during, I think during the COVID era and stuff like that. It's like we've come along a little bit of a long way to be here, and to see the Galaxy community come together, finally being happy, finally, just all the emotions that came after, those years. It's amazing to see, and I think I'll just never forget that as well. It's not just only just about the team; it's about the fans and everybody who kept being here even when the times were rough. So I think that's also another thing I'll never forget.
Also, something I'll never forget is 0 losses at home all season. I mean, that's just absolutely incredible. To not lose a single game at Dignity Health Sports Park this season, like that's just like truly incredible, really. The last time we lost a home game was 4-1 against FC Dallas on decision day of 2023. Like, imagine I told you right after that FC Dallas game, like, hey, we're not going to lose a home game in one whole calendar year. Like, you would have thought, like, well, there's no way that's going to happen. Then here we are. We haven't lost a home game all season long. Like, I knew Dignity Health Sports Park, our goal is to make it a fortress, but a fortress being, 0 losses all year, it really is. Like, you got to give it up to the team. Like, they made the fans' experience completely worth it all year. And the fact that, like, I went to almost all the home games this season, left for college, and then came back and they still haven't lost a home game even when I've been gone for months is, like, it truly is remarkable.
It really is, man. Like, that's something I guess we can also look at that and just say that we never expected it. Like, and again, people are going to bring up the Rose Bowl game, but it's like, that didn't really count. I don't care. It's like,
It's not a home game. That's
yeah, it's not a home game. Yeah, it's like, it's about Dignity Health Sports Park being the fortress, and also Dignity Health Sports Park getting, new upgrades in this offseason. But still, though, Dignity Health Sports Park being the fortress that it was this season was also remarkable in the stadium, even in the playoffs. I mean, it was amazing to see that, man. Like, I think that's also you're right. Like, that's something that I'll never forget either. And I think that's, that's something that'll be remembered forever as well. So yeah, I mean, great home atmosphere. That's something that's always going to be talked about as well.
Question, actually. I don't know if you know, but when is the last time we actually lost a home playoff game? Because in my entire time being a Galaxy fan for 12 years now, I don't think we've ever lost a single home playoff game before. That's how good we are at home in the playoffs and how important it is to us.
Yeah, I can't tell you on the top of my head, to be honest. Because even in the years where we made it to the playoffs, I mean, like, even in the bad years, like 2019, I don't think 2019 we had a home playoff game, right?
No, we had Minnesota.
Yeah. So we didn't even have a home playoff game. 2022, we had the one against Nashville. We won that one. Obviously, we went undefeated for this season. 2014, 2016, didn't we go?
It was RSL in round 1 at home. We won 3-1. Then it was Colorado Lake 1 at home. We won 1-0. I remember those.
Okay, then. So yeah, I can't even tell you what's the last time we lost a home playoff game.
And then 2014 we won the cup. 2012 we won the cup. 2011 we won the cup. So we have not lost a home playoff game in forever.
Yeah, or at least we can't even think one before that on the top of our head. But
I
still,
was watching.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, yeah, I don't know, man. But still, it's impressive regardless for this team. So it's like, yeah, home playoff yeah, I mean, being the fortress that it was this season and bringing that back is also pretty special as well for this team. But yeah, man, like I mean, that's something you'll never gonna forget either.
All right, question for you. When was like the moment where you thought like we could legitimately win MLS Cup? I'll answer this first. Like for me, it was when LAFC was eliminated. We officially had home field advantage the rest of the playoffs, and I was curious to see what would happen the next game. And we won 6-2 versus Minnesota. Like that game, that 6-2 Minnesota win, and then after knowing we had home field advantage the rest of the playoffs, was kind of the moment, like for me, where it was, this is ours for the taking now. I feel like the answer's the same for a lot of people, but I'm curious if that was sort of your moment where it's like, this is where like we have a legit shot to bring home the cup.
I mean, I think in general for me, it was always going to be like I need to see it to believe it. But to give you a moment, I think after the Seattle game, that was kind of where I felt like more like, okay, we're gonna, we have a really good shot of taking this, and if anything, we have the shot to take it. Because I think to me, it was like, all right, if we beat Seattle, like obviously if we beat Seattle, we're gonna go regardless. But it's like if we beat Seattle, which is a very very tough team, a team that we've had history with in playoffs before, it's like if we can beat that team, I think they're gonna go win it after that. Like that was like a moment in my head where I was like, okay, I think if we beat Seattle, that's a good shot. But even then, going into the final, I was like, all right, I got to see it to believe it. But still though, like I think after the Seattle game, that was kind of like, all right, to me, that's the big final test in terms of that. And I think that's kind of where for me it was kind of like a little bit of a okay. Once that happened, I think we're gonna take it. That was my moment for sure. But anything else you want to say about the season in general about the team?
Yeah, obviously just an incredible run, honestly, incredible from start to finish, an incredible playoffs, and we ultimately got the reward we deserved, which was a 6 star.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Got that 6 star, and yeah, it's something that we'll never forget for sure. But yeah, definitely a good moment for everybody. All right then, but let's move on. I think we're gonna do a little grading for all the players and sort of talk about the good moments about this season before we move on into a little bit of some off season stuff. So I guess we'll talk about player grading. I don't know how we want to start this. Do you want to kind of just do this about the kind of go by positions, or how do you want to do this?
I mean, if you want to just read off the roster, we can do that if that would help.
Okay. Let me just look up the roster real quick then, because it's not like I can think of everybody on top of my head. But
yeah, that's fair. I couldn't either. Probably most players, but I definitely leave out a few.
yeah. All right, let's see your roster. All right, then this is off the website, so I'm just gonna go on the players that are just listed here.
All right, so we can both give a letter grade. We can both just say ours and move on.
Yeah, definitely for sure.
That's cool.
Yeah, we can do that. Do you want to talk about, I guess, some of the players that were mainly on Ventura County, or just strictly the guys who are on the first team?
Let's just do first team.
Okay, then. Yeah. So if I see it, like for example, like Aaron B. Boot, we're not gonna grade because he's listed on the roster. But anyways, first one that's on the roster, Julian Aude. What do you grade him?
I gotta say a C, honestly. Like, I had very high expectations this year. Him having a full preseason, him being a starter. Like, I don't know, he was just always a little bit too inconsistent. And then, kind of lost his spot after the El Trafico game. Like, I expected a bit better, honestly. I'll say a C.
I'll go with, yeah, I think C is a valid one. I would say C minus, but then it was like, well, the injury, it's like you can't really fault on him too much on that. So I guess C would be a valid one for me. So yeah, I'll agree with you on that one. C. All right, then. So that was Julian Aude. Miguel Berry. What did you grade that one?
I mean, probably a D. Like, he put in effort. He was a big body. But just quality-wise up top, if Joveljic wasn't playing, you didn't really have a second striker because you didn't really want to play Miguel Berry. You kind of just moved Joseph Painsil to center forward, like, during the summertime a little bit. So, like, I don't know. I don't think he offered enough quality offensively, but my expectations weren't that high either. So it's like, I'm not really that mad about it.
I'll put, well, is D plus an actual grading, right? D plus, is that a thing?
Yeah, that's
so
fine.
I guess D plus, like sure, like you didn't really expect much from him, but I will give him a little bit of the clutch goals that he had, even though it was only like 2. Like, I mean, I will say like those moments, like even though he didn't score a lot, like I still say those clutch goals kind of give him a little bit of more points on that in my end. So I'll say D plus for Miguel Berry. All right, next one, Gaston Brugman.
I'll say a B minus. Like when he played, he was always really good. Can't really knock him too much for not being available. Stepped up in the most important moment. Actually, just for the final, I'll give him a B, from a B minus to a B, just for the finals performance. Like, he was good. He was still good for the Galaxy. He was still a valuable asset. Maybe couldn't play as much as he wanted. Lost his spot to Surreal, but I still think he was a good player for us.
I'll go with I'll go with just B, I guess. I don't know about B plus, but
I said B.
oh, you said B.
Yeah, I went from B minus to B.
Then actually I'll probably go B. I'll actually stay on B minus. Like again, I think he didn't have too much time with us. Like still was a valuable asset. Maybe the injuries weren't entirely his fault. But there was some moments where we thought maybe Gaston maybe it doesn't have it in him as much as we thought he was. But again, the final kind of I think showed how much he's worth on this team. So, but still though, I think B minus might be one for me. So I'll put him on that. Next, Edwin Cerrillo.
A.
Yeah, I'd say A. A for me. A for him and just in general what he's done this season. So I'd agree with that one.
I almost said A minus because of his first half of the season, but like he was just too good in the second half of the season. I think it bounces out to an A.
Yeah, I'd say it'd be an A. Mauricio Cuevas.
C. Like he was okay. He did what we asked him to do, but he didn't really have that big of a role on this team, so nothing too much.
Yeah, I'll go with C as well on that one. Mark Delgado.
B plus. I think he was really good. Brought a lot of energy. Maybe wasn't always fully available like we wanted him to be, but when he played, you could tell how valuable he was. I'd almost say A minus, but I think B plus is fair.
I was gonna say A minus for me. I think he's still very much a valuable asset to this team. Like even with the rough moments that he had, like I still think he was still an A minus in my opinion. All right, next Diego Fagundes.
I'll say A minus or. You know what? No, I'll say A. You know why? Because he was always ready when we asked him, whether it's the beginning of the season, the middle of the season where he had injuries, the end of the season, whenever he's coming off the bench. We still consistently got results with Fagundes in the lineup, and I just got to credit for him for always being ready and still being productive with our team and making everyone around him better. So I'd say A.
I'd go with A on that one as well. Emilio Garces.
A. I mean, he was sensational when he got the opportunity and never lost his spot, and he was a huge part of what we tried to do.
If anything, I kind of want to put him at A plus. Like even with the small sample size, I guess we got of him, still was a very big asset for us.
The only thing keeping me from a plus is the sample size.
I still think this, even regardless of the sample size, I think he deserves an A plus for me.
That's fair.
Okay, Dejan Joveljic.
A plus.
A plus for me too. Let's move on. Did have some moments with Ventura County, but I think he did still spend some time, a lot of times with the first team. But Tucker Lepley.
Came from a B rookie season. I think he showed some good moments. Obviously, he had that Salt Lake game where he started. He was pretty good, and I think he's an interesting piece. I'd say solid season for him.
You said B?
Yeah, like just like a B rookie season. Kind of from my expectations too. I think that into account. Like I think he's pretty good.
Okay, I think I'd put him C plus in my opinion. Like I think yes, he's a rookie, but I still think like if we just look at overall, I think it was just still more of like. He was still on the team, maybe didn't have too many moments, but still was good when he had his chances. So I'll say C+. John McCarthy.
B plus.
Yeah, I'd say B plus for that as well. Novak Mikovic.
B. I mean, the opportunity wasn't that big when he played. I mean, he had the Leagues Cup shootout we won.
Yeah.
He was still reliable when McCarthy was out. Like he was pretty good. So I don't know.
I'm gonna go B minus, just a little under. Jalen Neal.
C plus.
Ooh, that's tough. Like
I mean, he just ended the season so bad though. Like against LAFC in Portland, he just got annihilated, bro. Like it was a point where we couldn't play him anymore. But like before then, he was kind of playing at a B plus level. But those two games were like they just brought him down a lot for me, which is unfortunate. But that's the way it ended.
Yeah, I'll go C plus on him too. All right, next John Nelson.
A.
I'd go with A as well for him. Joseph Painsil.
A.
I'd go with A as well. Isaiah Parente.
He didn't even play with the team, though. I can't really give him a grade.
Yeah, I was going to say, he was with the first team technically, but I don't think he really played as much as us. So I guess we'll go no grade on him. Gabriel Peck.
A plus.
A plus. I don't think there's a question on that one. The next one's also an easy one. Ricky Puig. Shit, I'll go A plus if anything, if that's a rating. Let's see. I don't think we should add Ruben Ramos. He mainly spent time with Ventura, so I don't think we should add him next. Marco Royce.
B minus.
I'd say B minus. I think even regardless without the stats, and again, a lot of people like to look at stats. I think he was still a pretty big key part of this, even though he didn't have that many stats. So I'll go with B minus. Mickey Yamane.
A plus.
I'd go with A plus as well for him. Maya Yoshida.
A plus.
All right, A plus as well. And then last but not least, Eric Zavaleta.
C.
I'd go with C as well. Even with the small sample size, I still think he didn't have that many bad moments. So I'll give Eric Zavaleta a C. So no Fs. That's a good thing. No Fs on this team. So that was all our gradings, I guess.
How about Greg Vanney? I'll say A, honestly.
Oh, you want to go coaching staff? I'd go with A for Greg Vanney. I mean, like I said, I think he should have won Coach of the Year, so I definitely would give him an A. So yeah, definitely for sure. But
Will
yeah, in
Kuntz
terms of, I think Will Kuntz is an A plus plus plus, dude. Like, I mean, the work he's done has been phenomenal. So yeah, I think in terms of those guys, yeah, that's our ratings. So again, no Fs. That's a good thing. So yeah, I mean, who's the only one we gave a D? Was it just Miguel Berry?
it was, yeah.
Damn, I feel bad for Miguel Berry for getting the only one getting a D. I was gonna say they didn't add Martin Cáceres on that roster. Would you give Martin Cáceres on there?
A B.
Okay, yeah, I'd give it a B as well. For even before he got injured, I think he was doing okay. So yeah, I'd go with a B. So yeah, that was our player gradings of the season. I guess next now we can talk about it a little bit is best moments of the season. So I guess I don't know if you want to say a couple ones or just one, but what was your best moments of the season?
My favorite moment of the season was definitely the derby for sure when we were down 2-0 at home on the verge of getting swept, backs against the wall. To see us score 2 goals in 3 minutes, and then to see that complete turnaround of momentum we had to eventually take the lead 3-2, then to ice it off 4-2. I mean, that game was just, it was so tough, honestly. That game was so good. Down 2-0 versus your rivals to making it 4-2, 2-2 in a span of 2 minutes. At home, the place was electric. I wasn't there, but I was watching it on TV. It was just like, I mean, what a game, honestly. And the goals we scored too, all of them were just really good goals. You can't really beat that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, other than winning the final being our best moment of the season.
I was talking about regular season.
Oh, we were just talking about regular season. Okay,
Yeah,
so
'cause
no
that's an easy
playoffs.
choice.
Okay, yeah, that is very much an easy choice. I think regular season, yeah, I think that'd be probably the best moment, right? Like
I
I'm
will
trying
also
to.
say a very good candidate is winning in Real Salt Lake. Like, think about it. We just won 2 games in a row. We had never won 3 games in a row under Greg Vanny, and Salt Lake was on a 15-game unbeaten streak. We go into Salt Lake over the
Mhm.
weekend and we beat them. And to make it better, I was there too. So I got to see our 3-game winning streak against a team who hasn't lost in 15 games. That Real Salt Lake game is a game I'm going to remember a long time where Gabriel Peck scored the winner, the give and go with Jovic. Like, that game was so special too.
Yeah, that definitely was one. But I still would think, yeah, I think the El Trafico for the 4-2 was probably the best one of the season. Even though I said whoever won that game was going to be the Western Conference, first in the Western Conference, obviously that wasn't the case. But still, I think that one was probably the best moment of the season for me as well. I'm trying to think of another moment that was pretty massive for in terms of.
Week 2 is definitely really good. Beating San Jose 3-1 on their home opener. That was a game I was also at, and that team looked very impressive that day. Funny enough, actually, after that San Jose win in week 2, I said, like, outside the stadium, like, man, we have a team going here. Like, this looks pretty good. Like, I'm looking forward to what I'm seeing. I'm excited about it, and boy, was I right.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I think that kind of set a tone a little bit. I will say, I think getting the sweep against San Jose was still a pretty big deal too.
Definitely.
I think that was a pretty good moment in the season. Even though they were bad this season, I still think getting a sweep against your rivals is still a very big moment in the season. So I will say that would probably be an honorable mention in terms of that. But I mean, yeah, there was a lot of good. I mean, obviously the season was good in general, but I think in terms of being the one being on top, it would have to be that 4-2 win against LAFC. Yeah, I think that'd be the best one for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
All right then. But anything else you want to talk about? I guess about the season. Anything that stood out to you, or anything that you want to add on?
Yeah, like you mentioned earlier, and I totally agree. The mentality of this team was always incredible. Like, look, throughout the season, we didn't always get great results. There was times where we didn't get good results, like the Chicago game or the Rose Bowl game. But one thing you mentioned is like this team always had the ability to bounce back after a poor result. Not one time this season did we lose 2 games in a row. And then every time like we had sort of this bad moment, the team would just completely respond and pick themselves up and put in a really good performance and get all 3 points. Like, that mentality, really raised the ceiling of the team, and I think made everyone believe that we could win a championship this year.
I think so as well. Like I always appreciated that mentality, and even after the pretty bad games, like even against after Austin or like a Chicago, I think a lot of people always like erupted after that. It's like, oh, this team is not good enough to win, MLS Cup if you can't beat those teams. What I always kind of argue too is like, sometimes you need those really shitty losses to really,
Wake you up.
yeah, to wake you up. So it's like I always kind of look at it that way. But again, clearly, this team always had that move on forward mentality. So I think that's always something you got to appreciate about this team for sure. But yeah, obviously a season to remember. No one's going to forget this 2024 season, the season where we came back to glory, winning the MLS Cup. And now with everything said and done, The off season is here, man. We got to go back into how are we going to go into 2025
Heck,
and
preseason's almost here before you think about it.
I mean, yeah, preseason starts in. I mean, shit, these guys return to the facilities in like January. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it's gonna, yeah,
Fly
definitely for
by.
sure. Yeah, it's gonna be going by quick. So, yeah, we head into 2025. Now it's the matter of how are we gonna run it back? Is that a possibility? Obviously, we won't talk about that, but we will talk about. I guess sort of how are we going to prepare going into 2025? Obviously, after what's being said and done, there was some roster moves. To make it short, the only one that is not returning next season as of right now is Martin Cáceres. They did not pick up his option, to renew his contract. Or I think he was out of contract, but they just decided not to renew him. There are some other guys who are out of contract, but are looking to bring back, like Yoshida, Zavaleta. I believe, I forget who the third one is. Got to look into that one. But for sure, there are some players that they are negotiating with. But in terms of everybody who got moved, Martin Cáceres is unfortunately the only one who will not be returning next season to the Galaxies. I mean, I guess if you want to talk a little bit about the roster moves, how'd you feel about them, and what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I'll keep it simple. I think they were all the correct decisions.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And in terms of Martin Cáceres, I mean, we gotta appreciate what he's done here. I mean, even though he was part of a team that maybe didn't have a lot of, there was some highs for him here and some lows for him, but ultimately he came out as a champion, and I don't think we'll forget him about that. So Martin Cáceres, of course, best of luck for him in terms of what he does in his future. Supposedly he's going to stay in the United States to, recover from his injury. Maybe he might go to another MLS team. I don't know. I think there was reports saying that he's going to most likely retire. So that's also another thing as well. Whatever he does, we wish him the best of luck for sure. And once a G, always a G. So in terms of roster moves, that was the only one moved. If you look at other stuff in terms of the MLS offseason, there was the expansion draft. Luckily, nobody was taken from there.
I thought
so no,
Fabrinas was going to get taken, honestly, when I saw he was
I
available.
Yeah, when I saw the list, I was like, oh, how do you not take that? But I guess San Diego wants to go a different route in terms of how they want to build their team. So Siango. San Diego did not choose any Galaxy players in terms of the expansion draft. So there is that. There's CONCACAF Champions Cup. That was also released, the scheduling and all the pairings and stuff like that for the matchups. Galaxy get a bye into the round of 16 because they are the MLS Cup champions. They will either face Real Salt Lake or I think it's a Honduran team, CS I forget the name. I just had it right now. Let me just make sure real quick. Heredaño. I think that's how you say it. So there is that. Those are the possible matchups, either RSL or them. I guess, how do you feel about CCC in terms of the matchups, and what do you think that's going to look?
I'm looking forward to playing it. We haven't played it in 10 years, and it's a great opportunity to showcase our team on a North American scale.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely we'll see what that does. And yeah, I mean, obviously we haven't been in that tournament in 10 years, so I mean, we'll see what happens. But of course, we just gotta wait to see what happens with RSL and Redaño in terms of their matchup. So we'll see what that happens. But CCC is going to be interesting, especially with no Ricky Puig in that tournament. How are we going to do it without him? And I think that's going to be also another thing we got to look out for in terms of the off season. Okay, but there was that. There was some rumors going around as well. Obviously, I think I'd mentioned it earlier. There was some interest, European interest for Gabriel Peck. Some of the team names was Arsenal. I believe Liverpool were in it, and I think Atletico Madrid was also one of the teams, and like Newcastle. I think those were the
too.
I didn't see that one as well, but okay, Inter Milan. So Inter Milan is also part of that. So there's a lot of teams and pretty big teams that are looking for Gabriel Peck services. I don't know if necessarily if it's going to happen or not. Those are just rumors, but I mean, just in terms of general, how do you feel? I guess like those kind of teams are looking at a player like Gabriel Peck.
Hey man, look, if you're looking to come to Europe, come to Napoli, please. Like, don't go anywhere else. Just go to Napoli. That's all I really got to say about it.
There you go. Maybe Gabriel Peck's listening to this and he's like, you know what? I'll go to Napoli. Fuck it. Make my name there. But yeah, though, definitely some rumors there. There was also a rumor of possibly interest from us. I forget the player name, a Swedish player or someone playing in Sweden. I forget the name of it.
That was multiple MLS teams, I think, but I forgot the name too.
There you go. I got the name. Galaxy amongst one of the MLS teams looking for Besar Sebovic, who plays in the Swedish First Division. The other teams that are interested are the Portland Timbers and Real Salt Lake. So that's one rumor that we're looking at there. I don't know how you feel about that, but I guess we can, kind of look a little bit further, just to talk about it. But I mean, I guess what do you say could be some needs that we're going to look for into this offseason, and what moves we might be able to make?
Yeah, I put it on my story, but like I think we should look at a backup striker, honestly. With Martin Cáceres leaving, we have some TAM money freed up. Like I think with Ricky Puig out next season, like we will need a little bit more offense up top and maybe a bit more of a quality striker if Jovic isn't available. I'll definitely look to bring one in for sure. And also another big thing is we have a U20. Think about it, we have a U22 initiative spot open. That's a massive piece to a team. And what I would use that spot on is I'd use it on a midfielder, a number 8 midfielder to really back up Delgado, kind of a guy who can bring in a lot of energy, who can play on both sides of the ball. I think would be huge for the Galaxy. Like a $7 to $8 million transfer, a guy who can come in, make a difference in that center midfield spot. I think that U22 spot could be a massive opportunity for us to bring in somebody, and I'd like to see us use it. That's pretty much it, honestly. Mostly the U22 initiative spot in the midfield, and then probably a backup striker. And other than that, it's like I don't really look at any spots and say like, we need to really upgrade it. Maybe a backup right back, but like Cuevas isn't really that bad, and Yamane has always been very available. So like, I don't know, a backup striker would be really good, and maybe using the U22 spot on a midfielder to back up Delgado, because right now we really have no one for backup Delgado's spot. So I think that could definitely be very helpful to our team if we're able to bring in, maybe one or two players there.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I think those are some of the spots that we're gonna have to look in. I think the main goal for this team is they're gonna try to keep most of these players like the same team. Obviously, I think that's a lot of championship winning teams that like to keep the same players around, at least most of them. But yeah, I mean those are obviously some positions we got to look at. I think midfield is going to be very interesting because without Ricky Puig, I think that's also going to
Yeah, I have a
how we
question for you
shape it.
actually.
What's up?
I have a question for you actually with Ricky Pooch being out, and I was kind of thinking about it. Like, do you bring in a number 10 alone to like help out for 75% of the season, like during Champions Cup too? Because I feel like this team would just operate better with a 10. Honestly, like if you brought in somebody on loan, obviously it'll be attractive because you played good football and you're in a big market too. So you could bring someone on a 1 year loan. Like, would you consider bringing in somebody to try to like help out, or would you just like maybe trust Diego Fagundes and Gaston Brugman to run that midfield and be like, these guys are reliable. They show they can do it. We can just kind of play ways we've played without Ricky before. Or would you kind of add like a major 10 to it for the year just to like, maybe keep this team higher and more in the mix in the regular season and in Champions Cup games?
That's a good question because I think a lot of people, some people have been saying that. I think like just an example, like I think some people were saying, I think Alexi Lilas and I think Landon Dono even said that like they should get Gino Reyna on loan. I don't know. I don't think that's likely. But obviously, like, some people, those two have been saying that. I mean, it's not out of the norm that, it's not outrageous of a take, but I just don't think it's likely. But I mean, I don't know. That's a very good question because I guess that just, it's like, I guess that's all on Kuntz, It's like, how much confidence does he have with this team without Ricky? And I think, we've had success without him, but now it's the matter of, okay, now it's not,
almost.
yeah, it's like, now it's not only just about winning games, it's about how are we going to go and win another championship and even other tournaments like Champions Cup or maybe even the US Open or things like that, right? It's like how do you look at tournaments like that? It's like, so I think it's more about just winning games and staying afloat now. It's like, okay, how do we keep playing the way we've been playing to get back into those, finals and things like that, right? So I don't know. That is a good question. Like I said, it's not outrageous for for them to do that, but I just don't know who that'd be. Again, they said Gio Reyna. I don't think that's likely, but still, regardless, like that could be an option if it's possible. But I don't know. To me, that's interesting. I don't know how you feel about that.
Honestly, I would bring in a number 10 on loan because I think it would just make that our team that much better and really hold it down until Ricky Pooch comes back, hopefully in the fall. But I think like just having that would, really help our team in. If it's a good enough player, like maybe we wouldn't lose that much of. Obviously, we'd lose a step because Ricky Pooch is just that good, and you can't really replace him. But kind of something it reminds me of is like in 2019 when Alessandrini went down injured for like 7 to 8 months, and we brought in Fabio Alvarez. Like yeah, like obviously Fabio Alvarez wasn't Alessandrini, but this was still a piece we brought on our team that helped us win games. That was a good player for us. That was still trying to fit in with what we were trying to do. Like someone like that would like. I think it would definitely benefit the Galaxy a lot and still keep them very competitive and really good in most matches that they would be playing.
Yeah, definitely for sure.
Just gotta be the right guy.
Just got to be the right guy, and I think that's going to be, those are the questions that are going to have to be answered with Will Kuntz within this like next few months until the season starts. Yeah, definitely for sure interesting to see what's going to happen. Yeah, the off season's here, and we're gonna now we head into 2025 for sure. But anything else you want to say about the offseason or anything else in general?
I mean, that's what I like about Will Kuntz though, is I don't think he's going to bring in a player just to force him to signing or try to force something. Like, if Will Kuntz makes a signing, it's going to be for the right reason. It's because it's the right fit for the team and the right decision. So I have full confidence in what he's going to do this offseason.
Yes, sir. And Will Kuntz we trust. So yeah, definitely for sure. It's gonna be interesting to see what he does and in terms of this team. Yeah, man. I think that's gonna do it now for this episode. Our final episode of the year, of the season. And we're champions, so we're gonna celebrate this win and still cherish this win, definitely for sure. But obviously, before we go, just can't thank you all enough for obviously watching and listening to the show this whole season. Appreciate the support as always, even though just I don't know, just like we just appreciate it. We always do this just because we like it. I started this off as a just a side project, I guess you could say. When I started my page, and now completing our 4th season, that's a pretty big deal. Obviously, I appreciate you, Alex, for being here the whole season, or for most of the season. Obviously, going into school and transitioning there, you weren't here always, but still, though, I appreciate you for the times being here as well. Just talking about LA Galaxy, man. And honestly, just in general, what a ride it's been for these past 4 seasons, and just, getting to this point. I think it's amazing. But yeah, man, I don't know if you have any other final thoughts before we close out the episode for, just for the show and just maybe just in general for the listeners.
Yeah, obviously, just an absolutely incredible season. I mean, start to finish, we played some amazing football, had some amazing memories, ended off on a perfect note, winning our 6th championship, bringing the club back to glory. Just a fantastic season, honestly. I appreciate you for doing this. Appreciate all the Galaxy community for being there all the way. It's been a great ride. And yeah, let's build off it, and let's go into next year even stronger.
Definitely, for sure. Got to go into next year even stronger. But yeah, man, going to be a season to remember, and I can't thank you enough. I can't thank the listeners enough. I can't thank, just the Galaxy community in general enough. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be a good one. But with that being said, be a friend, tell a friend about the podcast, whenever you're listening to this podcast. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, rest of your week. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. All the, Happy Kwanzaa, whatever, the holidays you celebrate, just happy holidays in general. Yeah, we'll all see each other next year, next season. So, yeah, it's been a hell of a season. It's one to remember, and I can't thank you all enough for being here. But thank you guys. Thank you all for listening, and G's up.
7 words.